faces have joined us.
Okay, streaming now. Thanks, Jordan.
Okay, looks like most of us are here. So I'll welcome you, colleagues, rights holders, partners, school district staff, our esteemed guests to our special budget meeting. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Songhees and Esquimalt nations on whose traditional territory we live, we learn, and we do our work. I just want to take a quick moment to position myself as an uninvited settler on these territories and invite all of you to reflect as if orienting a compass on your relationship to the land and to the people who have lived and thrived on these territories and have shown so much resilience through all the processes of colonization that bring us to this moment here, all together at this table virtually to have this meeting tonight. As we begin our meeting this evening, I'd like to express on behalf of the board our sincere thanks and appreciation for the impassioned and thoughtful feedback and all the contributions of the Greater Victoria School District's community, our rights holders, stakeholders, our students, community, parents, everyone who's come together throughout this budget process that we've undertaken over the past number of months. Hearing from all of you is so critical to our decision-making as trustees and as a board of education. There's no question that this journey to this evening, to this moment, has been a very hard one, with some lessons, hard lessons learned along the way, for which I am grateful. We are all a learning community, and if we cannot create the conditions for learning and unlearning in our schools, in our district, in our community, then who can? It's abundantly clear and like critical, so essential that we work to establish and advance our work with the Indigenous learning partners and rights holders. With Friday's announcement of the 215 beloved children lost but now found by Te Kamloops Shewetmuk, our focus must be unwavering on the impact and power of our education system it can have on the futures of so many Indigenous people, and the important role that SD61 has to play in meeting the needs of the four houses and their students. Considering the importance of the decisions ahead of us tonight, I know that our emotions will be heightened, but I trust that we will work together respectfully and collegially to arrive at a decision. Let's let our shared commitment to the well-being and life chances of our students be our guiding star throughout the meeting. Having a balanced annual budget is one of the most important fiduciary duties for a board of education, and it is essential to enabling the school district to move ahead in the important work of educating our nearly 20,000 students. Joan Axford, thank you for joining us again this evening, and thank you for the work you have done on our behalf. I'm going to now turn to Superintendent Shelley Green and then to Secretary Treasurer Kim Morris to provide some context for the scope of the meeting ahead of us tonight. Superintendent Green.
Thank you, Chair Waters. Trustees, rights holders, partner groups, reps, members of our Greater Victoria learning community, our four houses. I appreciate this opportunity to address you as we begin this very important meeting tonight. As we know, the budget development process this spring has been extraordinarily difficult and incredibly intense. Due to COVID restrictions, we've not been able to create or engage in the highly effective consultative process that we value and we were able to do in previous years. I realize this has created challenges for providing information and clarification throughout our process, And we'll be taking all the recommendations that we've heard as we've gone through this practice very seriously as we plan for a different budget process beginning in the fall. The preliminary budget options being considered at tonight's meeting have been developed after considering ministry funding information and district enrollment forecasts, as well as known and anticipated costs of providing services. Our projected revenue will not be sufficient to sustain our current operations, and trustees must consider where funds are required to address our district strategic plan and the current programs that we have. There's no doubt that trustees will be required to make difficult decisions. This is challenging times. All of us involved in public education value the programs and services of our students. They make a difference to children's journeys, to their lives. These are important decisions, and we value the work that's currently being done and all the programs we have. Tonight, trustees will consider the wide range of options provided by our Secretary-Treasurer, the extensive feedback you have received from community, and it has been extensive, and we really appreciate those voices. The advice of stakeholders, the nation's right holders, and of course our advisor. Following the completion of our budget process, staff will be working with the board to adopt recommendations from trustees' motions that will come forward tonight, our advisor, and all the community information that has come forward. This work will create clarity and thoroughness that will provide time and greater opportunities for communication and engagement from the broader community. And we've heard that loud and clear, and we are committing to starting that early in the fall. We need to create a process that will build a high standard of transparency and trust for these budget cycles. And we've heard your voice. As we begin this meeting and the board debates its options, I'm confident that the decision will focus on providing a quality learning environment for all of our 19,000 plus students. We're aware this is only the beginning. We truly appreciate all the feedback we've received and look forward to initiating the consultation engagement opportunities early in the fall. Thank you, Chair.
Secretary-Treasurer agree? Or Morris?
Thank you, and thanks for coming, everyone. I'd like to echo the comments of the superintendent and express my appreciation for the engagement and input and considerations provided by rights holders, stakeholders, and community. We work to answer questions, provide detailed information about the budget, and to assist the board in making the budget decision. I so appreciate the advisor's reports, considerations on how to improve our work going forward. Since March 29th, we've been engaged as a community in the 21-22 budget discussions. By mid-April, it became apparent that the board would need to make some significant shifts in resource alignment to balance the budget and meet the needs of students in relation to the strategic plan. On May 25th, the district received the independent advisor's presentation and subsequently the report on May 26th. On May 27th, trustees received feedback from stakeholders and public relative to the report. The reports confirmed the following: the district has a deficit. We have some projected surplus at our disposal to help balance the 21-22 budget. Improvements are to be made to future budget processes, including greater understanding of the budget and more focused, authentic, and collaborative conversation. And that the budget should be built on foundational principles that help measure any of the options considered. The board's work, as has already been stated, is to consider all the feedback it's received, debate the considerations in the budget options, and to carry 3 readings of a balanced budget bylaw. I have a letter from Reg Bawa, Assistant Deputy Minister, Resource Division, Ministry of Education, and with the chair's permission, I'd like to read that letter.
Please go ahead. Hang on, I am can everybody make sure that they're muted? I am hearing some sort of background noise. I know that can
That's from me. There's I think there might be a trades graduation or some sort of certification going on outside, which is great. I have to shut my.
Never a dull moment. Okay, well.
That quieter now? Okay, so the letter from the ministry reads, as School District 61 continues with its budget approval process for the 21-22 school year, I want to take this opportunity to highlight a number of relevant points that are set out in the School Act pertaining to budget expectations and the funding process, as well as point you toward the recent release of policies which may be helpful. As per section 113(1)A of the School Act, a school board by bylaw must adopt a balanced annual budget on or before June 30th of each year for the next fiscal year. This budget is based on the preliminary operating grants announced by the Ministry of Education on or before March 15th of each year, based on school district estimates of enrollment. Each year, all 60 school districts adopt a balanced budget by June 30th for the upcoming year. As a reminder, school districts submit actual student enrollment to the ministry as of September 30th, once the school year starts. Funding is recalculated using those actual district enrollments. Boards then revisit their budgets and pass an amended budget where supports and services to students are adjusted based on changes in enrollment and funding. All 60 boards of education follow this well-established process. On Friday, May 28th, 2021, the ministry released 2 new policies, the financial planning and reporting policy and the accumulated operating surplus policy. These policies provide more transparency to the public regarding financial management and the planning and use of accumulated surplus. It may be helpful to review these policies with your board and reference these policies to help guide future budget collaboration processes. Should you require the assistance of the Ministry of Education, please contact me and I will make staff available. I know that Joan Axford is also assisting the district and will provide thoughtful and valuable advice as needed. It's the end of the letter. Moving on to the discussion this evening, I just want to reiterate that the considerations in the Friday's options are not new information and are a starting point to generate ideas. They contain combinations of the balancing and reinvestment strategies we've been discussing since April 13th. It was important to listen to the feedback from May 27th before providing options to ensure the public was heard. Each option was not meant to be prescriptive, but was to be used as a tool for debate and for trustees to develop a sense of their own acceptance of reductions and what, if any, reinvestment for strategic plan and infrastructure are necessary based on information and feedback gathered from April 13th to today. Whatever option is developed and ultimately adopted, it must strike an important balance of use of surplus, building of reserve, reductions, and reinvestment for the best decision that can be made at this time, recognizing the changes that occur every year between preliminary budget in spring and amended budget in February. This is not the end of the conversation about budget 21-22. We are at a point in time and we know the budget will change frequently throughout the year. Work for the 22-23 budget will pick up immediately in the fall. Thank you, Chair Waters.
Thank you to both you, Kim, Secretary Treasurer Morris, and your staff. I want to recognize Katrina in particular. And Julie, of course, for all of your hard work. I know this isn't a one-person show by any stretch of the imagination. There's a full team behind you working really hard to get us to this point. So thanks to everybody. Now we can turn to approving the agenda or entertaining any motions to vary the agenda. So we're at A2, Trustee Whitaker, and then Trustee McNally, Trustee Ryan Painter.
So I do have the motion that I emailed in. Sorry, I don't have the agenda right in front of me. And did you want, I have an option 9. So I don't know if you want that added to the agenda or how you want that added to the agenda.
I feel pretty comfortable with us if you bring that forward as part of the discussion under committee of the whole. Okay. Rather than adding it formally to the agenda, I'll make sure you have time to share your work, because I know you've worked very hard in putting together an option. Trustee McNally.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to add at B1 the recently received letter from Chief Sam and Chief Thomas of the Songhees and Esquimalt Nations. We've heard a letter from Reg Bawa, and I think the least we could do is listen to a letter from the chiefs. Perhaps Kaylee could read that. And one more request to vary the agenda. I'd like to see Trustee Painter's motion at C1 moved up to B2.
Okay, thank you. Can you specify the dates of the letters? Very grateful for all the ongoing communication. The
Today.
one that's the one that is addressed to the minister.
The one that is dated June 2nd, 2021, and it's addressed to Jennifer Whiteside, Marie Rankin, Mitzi Dean, John Organ, and Sonia Firstino, and it's regarding our budget.
Okay. Do you have a seconder? We're going to do these one at a time, please. Trustee Duncan. Okay, all those in favor of adding the letter from the four houses to the minister at all?
The letter from the Songhees and Esquimalt nations signed by both chiefs.
Okay, I just want to make sure the letter that I have is also signed by Métis Nation BC and Janice Simcoe and Carrie Newman. Are we talking about the same letter, Trustee McNally?
We are. Sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough.
Okay, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. And then your second amendment.
Is to move Trustee Painter's motion at C, which is currently at C1, up to B2 right after that letter.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those, sorry.
Is there a seconder? Sorry.
There's a little bit of glitchy. Is there a seconder?
Certainly, Chair. Trustee Whitaker was trying to get your attention to speak.
Okay, and I trust Trustee Painter, you are seconding Trustee
I am.
McNally's
Thank you.
amendment? Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I just want to say that I think that there has been a lot of work done on these options, and I think that we should give some due course to those. So I'm not in favor of moving this. I do want to discuss that because I think that Rob Painter's motion will be strengthened after we've had these discussions and we know what it is, those specific areas that we are looking for more information on. So I would just have the board consider that. I value the motion. I just think that in order to give clearer direction, we need to have the discussion to figure out what areas we want to look at further if we do.
Thank you, Trustee Painter, and then Trustee Duncan. Also, I was just going to ask Secretary of Treasurer Morris, can you help me take care of the speakers list tonight? Because things are a little glitchy. I don't want to miss anybody.
Speaking in favor of the motion, my concern is that while I do think there is ample substance for discussion within these different options, my concern is that trying to move forward with these all in a single day does not give sufficient time for consideration. I think that they could be fully considered within the context of a longer review process. Thank you. Trustee
Duncan?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly speak in favor of the motion. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring the motion from Trustee Painter up to the second item. The first item on our agenda allows us to discuss through a process of a committee of the whole the various options and to narrow things down and to become more clear what we can be. And I think it is really certainly prudent for us to be considering Trustee Painter's motion in advance of us voting on any or removing any bylaws related to the budget. So I am speaking in favor. Thanks.
Trustee Leonard?
Thank you. I'm speaking against moving the motion up on the agenda, and my words would follow exactly what Trustee Whitaker said. At this point in time, I think it's important that we talk about the options before us because we have not had a chance to do that, and then see what comes of that. But I don't think Trustee Rob Painter's motion should be lost. I think it's a valuable tool after we finished our initial debate. So thank you.
Did I miss any speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Other Trustee Painter.
Yeah.
Other Trustee Painter, Chair.
Trustee Ryan Painter? Sorry, some of you are frozen.
Thank
hope
you.
that
And
resolves quickly. It makes it challenging.
thank you, Chair, and thank you first, Trustee Painter, for helping me get on the speakers list. I just want to reiterate that I really appreciate the thought behind this motion. As I said Friday night, I'm certainly willing to consider it, but I want to do this work first through the initial budget bylaw stages, see where we fall after that, and then we can consider the well-put motion in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question to amend the agenda to move C1 up to, I guess it would be B2 now after the correspondence that we just added. All those in favor? All those opposed? So I am seeing a 6-3 with trustees McNally, Duncan, and Rob Painter in favor, and the balance opposed. Please correct me if that is incorrect.
I ask a point of clarification.
Yes.
Just on the mentioned, I did send in a motion earlier this week for a needs budget. And I'm sorry, I just didn't have the agenda up at that time, and it is not on the agenda. Was there a plan for that this evening or in the future, or?
Thank you for the reminder. In my mind, it is sitting under business arising from the budget bylaw at B3, which is where I think there's a lot of motions floating around action that we need to take. Would you like to formally add it on so we don't lose it by amendment?
I'm just gonna have to go find it again. I just thought it would be typed out, so I'll find it and get it to somebody.
I have it.
Yeah, we have it. We
Okay,
have it.
yeah,
I think we just didn't. Perfect. We let everybody sort of work up to the last minute here and got the agenda out. So that's we will entertain any motions under B3 business arising. I think the board needs to be open to that. So that'll be sort of an open space to entertain supplementary motions. Trustee Rob Painter and then Nicole Duncan.
2 points. I'm among the guilty parties handing in late motions, but in my case, in my estimation, they can be deferred until tomorrow because they're not pertinent to the immediate budget discussion. So we don't have to worry about those at this point. The other point is I do want to express my concerns that we are not adhering to our bylaw 9360 with respect to our standard agenda, including opportunities for community presentations and public question period. I do appreciate that you've responded to me already, indicating that you were taking our special advisor or independent advisors direction on this. However, it is my personal belief that our bylaws supersede any individual's particular recommendations, and that amendment or variance from our bylaws should only occur with the approval of the majority on the board. Thank you.
Trustee Duncan.
I suppose my comment actually stems from Trustee Painter's point. I'm wondering whether it would be prudent for us to add some of the other correspondence that we received today regarding the various options presented by the Secretary Treasurer in her memo to the board on Friday afternoon. I know we've got at least 2 or 3 letters from our stakeholders. At the 1st of June, I believe the GBTA sent us a letter. We have a letter from VC PAC, which I believe was dated over the weekend. And indeed, I believe we also received a letter from BC Ed Access, although I'm not positive that that letter addresses specifically the memo, but rather is sort of general in terms of the budget process and speaking to it. So I wonder if it would be an opportunity now to, before we approve our agenda, to make an amendment and add those pieces of correspondence as well.
We certainly could. The one thing that I would just remind the board is that we've probably received, I don't know, 24 separate pieces, and that there's there would be a chance of missing something. And I think it might be nice to have those pieces of correspondence all, together and publicly on the agenda for everybody to consider. We kept this a very streamlined meeting because we have a lot of work to get to. And so really wanted to focus there, given that we've all received all of the correspondence. Secretary Treasurer Morris, are you able to elucidate which pieces of, do you know all the letters that Trustee Duncan's talking about? I'm just concerned we have a lot to add proactively to or retroactively.
I know of the letters she's speaking. I don't have them ready for the agenda or located, but I would agree with Chair Waters that several pieces of email were received over the weekend from various people relative to the budget that wouldn't be included should those be. So generally our process would be to include those on the June 21st correspondence, but hopefully everybody's received them by email, trustees in particular.
And just in terms of the other, just as a reminder, the agendas, when they go out, please send in your feedback in advance, because some of the stuff we can take care of before we're in a meeting. So we have do you want to list out the letters that you want added, Trustee Duncan?
Sure, and maybe with the assistance of our stakeholder groups, because I'm not talking about public correspondence. I'm talking about the correspondence from our stakeholders that have seats at our board table, and that would, if we had followed our bylaw, be proactively on the agenda. So I guess what I'm asking, in my view, is not unusual. I think what's unusual is that it's not proactively already on the agenda. So, and further, my understanding is that if we wait until the end of June, or till June, that there may not, it's sort of after the fact. Certainly if the board passes budget bylaws, it's going to be sort of too far down the track, from my perspective anyways, to have it appearing on a public agenda. So I can tell you that the GVTA letter is dated the 1st of June.
If you want to limit it to the correspondence received by rights holders and stakeholders or partners, then I think you could just move your amendment as such.
Yeah.
And then these would not appear in the under the regular June board meeting agenda.
Chair, I believe Ms. Axford is hoping to speak to this motion.
Sure, Ms. Axford.
Thank you, Chair Waters. I just wanted to clarify my advice around your bylaw and your deliberations this evening, and that was that you would adhere to your bylaw as you did your readings of the budget bylaw. So you would have your partners and your rights holders, stakeholders speak prior to debating the second reading of the budget bylaw, because then they can also give you advice on some of the work you've done in the committee of the whole. So it was not to not hear from people. It's important that you do, but it was when the best time to do that would be.
Certainly, and to be clear, that is absolutely the plan, is to all partners will have an opportunity to address the board before any final decisions are made. I think this is around there being a correspondence section prescribed within a particular, I think 9360, which is regular meetings of the board. And I think we need to have a conversation about how, because special meeting agendas often vary over time. So do we have any speakers? Do we have a seconder to the amendment to add the stakeholders correspondence?
Or did you want me to read into the record so that everyone's clear what other letter I meant in terms of VCPAC and the date of that letter? Or is that not necessary at this point?
It's not necessary for the action of adding it, but if you wanted to, you certainly could. But I think we can we can fill that in. I'm just concerned it's at 6:30 and we have a lot of work to do here. So I'm just hoping to move things along, and whatever is going to facilitate that, I support. So do we have a seconder for adding the correspondence, please? Trustee Rob Painter. Did we have any speakers to the motion?
I was just going to make this suggestion because I worry about missing any. But can we, I feel like tonight's meeting and tomorrow night's meeting are essentially the same meeting. Is that true? Can we ask staff to pull together the correspondence and have that officially on tomorrow's half of the agenda?
That would be much easier to do than.
Is that amicable or for everyone?
I would need clarification on which correspondence package you're talking about, these 3 letters or all of the correspondence. One is much more timely and easy to do in 24 hours than the other.
The motion on the floor right now is to amend by adding the stakeholder.
Then yes, we can add those for tomorrow's agenda.
Okay, but the motion we have moved and seconded is to add it tonight. Trustee Rob Painter.
Just speaking to the motion, if the decision was to move this to the correspondence package to tomorrow, then I would request that second and third readings be held tomorrow.
Okay, thank
just
you.
So that we can ensure that we are hearing from stakeholders at a time when there's still an opportunity.
Trustee Painter,
to
I need us to focus on one issue at a time. And so we have a motion on the floor. If anybody would like to speak to adding that correspondence.
I was speaking to that motion, Chair.
Okay, I'm hearing you talk about readings of separate bylaws. I'm just trying to keep us on track. So
Point of clarification.
Sure.
If the correspondence is on tomorrow night's package, will that then be then that will be available for the public before the meeting? So to me, that sounds like a better deal than putting it on tonight's agenda when nobody is going to, tomorrow is not looking at it. So I would just speak to that and I think give our staff the time, do it properly, allow the public to read that correspondence tomorrow.
Trustee Whitaker, are you moving to refer this amendment to tomorrow? I'm not sure how to.
I'm going to amend that motion to put on tomorrow night's agenda.
Great. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Ryan Painter. All those in favor of moving the correspondence to tomorrow? We'll get it up on the website as early as we can tomorrow. All those in favor? All those opposed? I've got Trustee Rob Painter opposed, Trustee Duncan opposed, and Trustee McNally, can you indicate you're also opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
And with thanks to all of our partners who have sent in those letters, and I look forward to the public being able to read all of them because they're fantastic. Well done.
Would somebody like to move approval of the amended agenda? Trustee Leonard, Trustee Whitaker, all those in favor of approving the amended agenda? All those opposed? Trustee Rob Painter, can you let me know how you voted?
I voted against. I voted against because of my concerns about 9360.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So the motion carries. So we're now at B on the agenda. Before we consider moving into committee of the whole, I wanted to welcome Secretary Treasurer Morris to provide an update or introduction.
Chair, point of order before we go anywhere. I believe I moved that we have a reading of the letter from Chief Thomas and Chief Sam and other signatories from the houses before we go anywhere. I think we need to set the scene, and this letter is going to do that. Is that not what you understood?
Sure. Yep. No, that's totally, that is fine.
So-
I apologize for moving on to the old
Thank you.
B1.
So as
We are
far
at
as
the new
who's
B1.
going to read it, as far as who's going to read it, I don't think I have the right to just grab it and read it. So I'm wondering if Kaylee would like to read it, or if Chief Thomas is still here, if he would like to read it.
I have asked Kaylee, our education director, to read it for us.
Thank you so much. I'll cede to Kaylee.
Great. Thank you
Welcome,
much.
Kaylee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Board of Trustees, stakeholders, and rights holders. I did not write this letter, but I am certainly honored to be able to read it for you on behalf of the leaders of our Indigenous communities. Just going to pull it up here. So this letter was written and addressed to Honorable Jennifer Whiteside, Ministry of Education, Honorable Marie Rankin, Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, Honorable Mitzi Dean, Ministry of Children and Family Development, Premier John Horgan, and MLA Sonia Firstino, leader of the BC Green Party. The reason for this letter is to discuss School District 61's budget 2021-2022. The 1,382 Indigenous children and youth who attend school in the Greater Victoria School District are represented by 4 connected but distinct Indigenous communities. We've heard them referenced as our 4 houses this evening. These include the Songhees Nation, Esquimalt Nation, Métis Nation of Greater Victoria, and the urban off-reserve community. Leaders from these 4 communities have gathered together, along with the former parent representative of the School District 61 Board of Trustees Indigenous Ad Hoc Committee, to address current issues arising from budget discussions. Prior to and throughout recent budget discussions, the needs of our children and youth have not been adequately addressed by this school district. Indeed, our children's needs have been pitted against the needs of other children in the school district. Moreover, throughout this time, the Board of Trustees has repeatedly acted in an offensive manner to the nations upon whose traditional territory the school district is located. The school district has continued to ignore the presence of and the assistance offered by the urban and Métis communities. The failures of the school district, including its Board of Trustees, has put our children and therefore our communities at risk. As we have had to so many times in the past, we are now speaking directly to those who ultimately make the financial decisions that affect our children and communities. Together, we request that the Ministry of Education consider 1, accepting the deficit carryover for this fiscal year in light of the pandemic and recent concerns, and or 2, increasing the allotted funding to help alleviate the deficit. 3, granting an extension and mandating a renewed consultation process to ensure that an unjust budget built upon systemic racism isn't forced through on procedural grounds. This is the right thing to do at this time of reckoning. We are sure that you will comprehend the harm that chronic underfunding and systemic racism has done to Indigenous students, families, and communities. It's crucial that action be taken now. Our Indigenous peoples have the fastest growing population of children in Canada. Forward planning is critical. We look forward to your government meaningfully implementing and acting on the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in this province. For the children, signed Chief Robert Thomas, Esquimalt Nation, Chief Ron Sam, Songhees Nation, Caitlin Bird, President, Métis Nation, Greater Victoria, Janice Simcoe, Chair, Urban People's House, and Carrie Newman, Indigenous parent and former Indigenous Ad Hoc Committee member. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reading that into the record. Very much appreciate you being here to do that. And certainly gives us a lot to think about. So now I believe we're at B2 in the agenda, which will be the annual budget. I just want to note the letter I'm just very grateful to Chief Thomas. Thank you for being here, and Chief Sam and Ms. Simcoe and Ms. Bird, and Mr. Newman for writing and engaging in this process with us. Thank you so much. I know the letter isn't addressed to us, but it is addressed to us, and it's certainly a call I think we all hear. Secretary Treasurer Morris, did you want to provide some information before we consider moving into committee of the whole and beginning our debate on the budget?
Sure. I think it would be helpful if the board moved into committee of the whole now, and then I would explain how, or do you think that I should explain how committee of the whole is going to work? What would you prefer?
I was imagining that you were going to explain, but we can certainly, I think we understand, but just good for everybody. We have so many, our protocols and processes are challenging.
Yes. So the purpose of moving into committee of the whole, we know that committee is more informal, although still structured through policy, is more informal than the board meeting. And moving into committee of the whole in the middle of a regular or special open board meeting is, or any board meeting, is to provide the trustees a more informal way to discuss, and particularly tonight to work through some scenarios and some spreadsheets on how they would like to balance the budget. And so the idea is that somebody now would make a motion to move into committee of the whole. Once we're in committee of the whole, the trustees will, I'll walk them through an example of what the work is tonight. The trustees, while they discuss, may land on a place where they feel comfortable moving out of committee of the whole with the budget and back into the regular meeting, where they may consider giving reading 1 and reading 2 of the budget bylaw to the in its regular meeting as recommended by the committee of the whole. We know committees can't make motions, but they can make recommendations to the board. So we move into committee of the whole, discuss, make a recommendation to the board, move out of committee of the whole, and debate the recommendation, and possibly give reading 1 and 2 to the budget.
And it'll be at that point, after all of our rights holders and partners have had the opportunity to hear the full discussion in committee of the whole, it'll be at that point that everyone will have an opportunity to provide comment. And I think hopefully that helps, given that you know where everybody's coming from and where things have landed. Correct?
Correct.
So would somebody like to move the recommended motion of moving into committee of the whole for trustee discussion relative to budget options and refinement of a preferred option for debate?
Sure,
Trustee Leonard? Pardon me, Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. Before doing that, I just have a point of clarification. So our partner groups and our rights holders around the table are not able to participate in the committee of the whole discussion. My understanding of committee of the whole discussions is that it allows for a free flow discussion. And given that our board table, regardless of whether we're in a committee of the whole or not, includes our stakeholders and our rights holders around the table, seems to me that it would be, to our benefit and to the benefit of our students to have them involved in our discussions, our more informal deliberations, before moving out, where they would presumably only have 2 minutes to speak to whatever motion moves forward tonight, if any.
I was not planning on being prescriptive around the 2 minutes, despite that being in our bylaw. I think sometimes flexibility is good. So yes, the proposal and the recommendations that we've received from our advisor is that we have a discussion as trustees, as the board. I think we've heard over the last several months a significant amount of feedback. There's been 48 presentations through 8 public meetings. So the idea here is that now we have a conversation about what we would like in the budget, and then we allow our partners and stakeholders to provide comment after they've heard our discussion. So yes, the idea here is to have a focused discussion in committee of the whole of trustees. I suppose that if you would like to do something else, you could strike for trustee discussion from the recommended motion, you can amend it that way, and we could go into a less prescriptive committee of the whole. Currently, I don't have a seconder for the motion on the floor. I have Trustee Leonard and
Yeah, I mean, so Chair, just to clarify then, yeah, I mean, my recommendation to my colleagues would be for us to move into a committee of the whole. Wonderful, but I mean, I think it makes sense to have our stakeholders around the table also able to engage in that sort of collaborative, more free-flowing discussion. But I leave it to the board and the will of the board.
do you have a seconder? Thank you, Trustee Rob Painter.
And point of clarification, Chair.
Yep.
I believe Chair of the VCPAC, Crystal Hammer, would like to speak to this, given that it's a motion, but is there an opportunity for her to speak to this motion? I understand the debate's already started, but this is one that will directly impact our stakeholders. So,
Sure, Ms. Hammer.
I just think that VCPAC, like everyone listening, would love to hear trustees ask questions and do their work. But I'm really concerned that you have not provided enough opportunity for us to ask questions and understand these options. And if you don't allow us into the committee of the whole discussion, where in the process are we going to get that opportunity as stakeholders, as rights holders, as the public? And it just doesn't feel like we're really part of or given a proper opportunity to think about this option, and then whatever option you guys settle on. Is there time in between that for us to participate and ask questions and be part of the conversation and a dialogue?
Thank you, Ms. Hammer, and I appreciate how involved you've been and your leadership for the parent community and all the parent involvement. The options are the same since April 13th, and they were recapped and repackaged through the independent advisors report, and then again through the option. So the possibilities, the options have not changed since April 13th. So I do just want to point out we have had 8 public meetings for asking questions and participating. So I recognize that we may not have reached your bar for engagement, but we've certainly tried our very hardest. There's a motion on the floor. Did anybody else want to speak to it? Carolyn? Nope. Trustee McNally?
Thank you. So I'd like to amend what we're going to do is called. In a committee of the whole, the chair is appointed and has to leave the chair. So Trustee Waters, I'm sure you didn't intend to do that. So in small groups like this one,
currently we have an amendment on the floor. So if we could,
can you just get me up to speed with that then, because this really should be informal consideration.
Can we deal with the striking for trustee discussion from the motion, and then we can deal with your a lot of procedural matters here. I'm looking so forward to our discussion. Is there any other debate on striking for trustee discussion, which would in effect open up committee of the whole to all of our partners? There's 30 people. Trustee Leonard?
Yes, I would just like to acknowledge that in multiple emails and input from the public and stakeholders, they've continually said that they have not heard from trustees. And so this is the opportunity now to hear from trustees. And so I am not dismissing what they're asking for, but there will be appropriate time before anything becomes final. And after they've heard the trustees talk about this, for them to stakeholders and right holders to have discussions there. So I'm looking forward to trustees doing what the public has asked us to do, is to actually have a discussion so they know where the trustees are sitting on some of these options. So I'm not in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Trustee Rob Painter, I believe you've spoken to the motion, but happy to let you once more.
Thank you, Chair. I think the last time I was actually trying to draw your attention to the Chair of VCPAC. All I would like to say is that I've been receiving questions and emails regarding the options right up until just the last few hours. There are quite a number of detailed points that frankly neither I nor I think stakeholders and right holders or the public community really understand, and leaving it entirely in our hands could result in some of those critical details being missed. One thing I do know is that the rights holders and our stakeholders and the public has always been very respectful and isn't likely to overwhelm the discussion. I believe that it'll still be down to the trustees. And of course, Chair, in recognizing the speaker, you have that ability to manage. So I don't see a challenge with it myself. Thank you.
Just to be very clear, I have zero concern about the comportment of our rights holders and partners. That is not my concern at all. I just want trustees to have a discussion about the budget options. So I'll call the question. All those in favor of striking for trustee discussion? All those in favor or opposed? Okay, so the motion carries. So I'm just curious, given Trustee McNally, can you go forward with your next addition to this process?
Thank you so much, Chair. So in Committee of the Whole, suited to large assemblies, the chair leaves the chair and a Committee of the Whole chair is appointed. What we need to do is take C on page 504 Robert's Rules, informal consideration. That's what we're going to do. Move into informal consideration, which is suited to small meetings of ordinary boards, simply removes the normal limitations on the number of times members can speak and debate. The regular presiding officer, that's you, remains in the chair, and the results of votes taken during informal consideration are decisions of the assembly, which are not voted on again. It's just a much simpler way to do exactly what you're proposing that we do, but it's appropriate to this assembly. So I would like to recommended motion that the Board of Education School District number 61 move into informal consideration.
We have a motion on the floor. Okay, no, we don't. We've passed it. So is this in contradiction to the motion that we just adopted, which is to move into Committee of the Whole?
I would just like us to either do Committee of the Whole, which means you are not in the chair anymore, or somehow revise this motion to be to move into informal consideration. I mean, if we're going to do it, we need to do it right.
So you're looking for another amendment to the amended motion? Trustee Whitaker, are you able to help us?
Yeah, for me, I think that this is just a clarification of wording. Am I incorrect, Trustee McNally?
No,
You want?
Yeah, there are implications for voting. There are implications for reporting out. There are implications, and if we're going to do
so lesson learned, we want to do exactly what Trustee McNally is saying. she is quoting, she is saying that Robert's rules calls it something different than a committee of the whole. So if we need to make that amendment, let's quickly do that because the intent is the same. And on. So she's just calling us on Robert's rules, and I appreciate how thorough she is with that book, because
We should really read it.
yeah.
So you are asking me to vacate the chair and
No.
no.
What she is saying is that she wants to do exactly what you want to do, but Robert's rules calls it something different than what we have called it. So we are going to call it the informal whatever.
Okay. So moved and seconded.
Perfect.
All those in favor of correcting the language? That's unanimous. Okay. Can we now pass the motion to move into committee of the whole? All
Or
those in
whatever you're
favor?
calling it.
Informal consideration.
Whatever, sorry, not whatever. I fully respect the change and think it's very important that we get it right. I am just chomping at the bit to hear a conversation about the budget. So that looked like it was unanimous to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll now turn it over to the Secretary Treasurer Morris to provide us an example of how we can work together to build a budget that we can stand behind and that will support our students and improve their life chances. Secretary Treasurer Morris.
Okay, thank you. I first wanted to give an update on the budget based on recent information and since the last time we really had a look at it. As you know, staff started looking for a shortfall of $10.8 million per the April 18th presentation. Changes have occurred since then. We've moved closer to year-end, projected year-end position, and the independent advisors report. So using both the year-end position and the independent advisors report, we've made the following changes to move from a $10 million shortfall to the 8.771 shortfall in the independent advisors report. So we start off with a $10.7 million shortfall from staff. We increased international enrollment revenue in our versions of the budget, but there are other tuition or other revenues associated with international enrollment that we did not increase, like homestay, et cetera. So we've added $320,470 to the revenue side of our budget. We have removed the purchase of capital assets of $1 million from operating, and that means any capital assets will need to be purchased from existing or new local capital, not operating. And in looking at the projected year-end position, we have reduced teacher salaries by adjusting the teacher average salary by $634,000. So this means the cost per teacher we are anticipating will be lower. So the risk involved with any of these three options is that international enrollment could be lower than budgeted and would require an adjustment, and that's no different than any other year between prelim and amended. Any capital assets would need to be purchased from existing or new local capital, which I mentioned. And the risk associated with the teacher average salary is that it may be higher in September than budgeted and would require an adjustment. The net effect of these three adjustments to the opening staff number of 10.7 brings us to the $8.771 million shortfall in the advisor's report and brings us to a sustainable services budget shortfall. Subsequent to the report, I met with the advisor to more fully understand the report, and we determined that the $1.35 million in new spending was not included in the sustainable services budget on page 15 of the report. Therefore, when we were looking at options 1 to 8, it's important to note we can't use any of the 1.3 as a strategy to reduce the 8771. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So because the options were a starting point for discussion, we're going to use the following approach to assist us in assist the board in today's discussion. And so the first step is to confirm the shortfall, which we've done. The second step is to discuss reserve. How much would the board like to keep? Third step is new spending. Are there any reinvestment or new spending that the board would like to consider? And the fourth step is any reductions to balance the budget or to cover the shortfall. And I'm just going to walk you through an example of what that might look like. Just bear with me. And so here's an example of how we might start our discussion or have our discussion as we move toward bylaw readings tonight. We've established that we have a consolidated budget. We know we have operating, special purpose, and capital. We know that we have a shortfall in operating, and that is $8.71 million. What we might want to discuss is if the board wants to keep a reserve. Does it want to spend the full 5.6 million at its disposal to balance the budget? Or would it like to use less surplus than that and retain some reserve? In this option, if the board has an $8.7 million shortfall and it uses all of its surplus to balance next year's budget, the shortfall we're looking for tonight is $3.113 million. The next thing we might ask ourselves, are there any spending items that we may want to consider in the 21-22 budget? The literacy, network infrastructure, or any of the other listed items. And so if we did want to look at a particular item, we would simply move it over and consider that. So when our shortfall is 3.1 after using all of our surplus, and we add in new spending, our new shortfall increases because we've added spending. Does that make sense? I can't see anybody, so I hope it does. I'll just move that out. Then if we make no new investments or no spending additions, our shortfall remains 3.1 million. We know from the independent advisor's report that in Appendix A, we have reduction options that are listed in order of least impact to the classroom to the most impact to the classroom. And so if the board were to take advantage of each of these savings, they would save $6.4 million. However, our shortfall is only 3.1. And so there are things here that may not be palatable to be reduced. And in this case, the board would begin to move items over or out of this option in order to balance its budget. So if we work on the premise that the things at the end of the list are the closest to the classroom, there may be a number of them that we can move over that may be palatable to the board in terms of moving toward a bylaw reading. And so I'll just balance this one perhaps. And here you can see with this savings, we've actually saved more than we've needed to. So we could reduce this one and say that we only need to save 200,000 or 200,006,469, not the full amount of this one. And in this way, we see that our shortfall is balanced because we've made savings of 3.1 and we had a shortfall of 3.1. And this moves us to our bylaw amount for reading 1 and 2 with $213 million in operating, special purpose and capital remain unchanged to move us to the bylaw reading. This option in particular, if we use it as an example, holds 0 reserve, has 0 new spending, has reductions of 3.1 and uses the full surplus of 5.6. And so that's an example of how we could move into conversation here in our informal consideration. Does anybody have any questions about that? Trustees?
We don't see any hands up.
Okay, great. And so I wonder if any of the trustees would like to bring forward any ideas that we can start to discuss on a fresh example.
Got Trustee Ryan Painter, Trustee Ann Whitaker, or Trustee Ann Whitaker. I think, sorry, I'm not sure who got there first.
Well,
Trustee Whitaker.
Yeah, I was gonna, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so I guess I would ask where I do have an option, which obviously now has a significant error for the spend in it. So how we would like to work through that piece. I understand you have this. I don't know, maybe.
Would you like to present your?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you're able to, because I don't have it set up this way. What I did was went with your sort of a template, and if you're able to pull out the pieces that I'm adjusting and then dump them into your calculator, and maybe we can look at it after.
You bet.
Because I'm going to be out by 1.3 million somewhere.
Okay.
I have every confidence that Secretary Treasurer Morris will be able to take your good work, Trustee Whitaker, and pop it in there.
And if I can't do it right away, I might need a couple of minutes recess.
Yeah, well, no problem. And I try to make specific notes showing you what I've done. If you can, you magic that.
Andy, did you want to display that, or do you want me to?
Trustee McNally, while Mr. Canty works on this, did you want
Thanks.
to
I'm
say
not,
something?
I'm not exactly sure what we're supposed to be doing right now. Is this a good time to look at things that are being cut and suggest moving them over to restoring them?
We're doing a model where we're actually going to start with what we want, yes, of reductions and restoring them. So saving rather than cutting. But I think Trustee Whitaker has prepared an option that I think let's just let Trustee Whitaker provide her ideas, and that gives us as good a place as any to start the conversation, if that's with consent of the informal consideration.
Director Canty will be displaying it, or if he wants me to. Here we go. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andy. You can go to the next one. And first, I just thank you everyone for bearing with me. This was the way I could figure out how to present it. It's not super pretty, and it was down to the line. So just like Secretary Treasurer, I started with characteristics of the option. And this one utilizes available surpluses. It is not the most, but maybe it will be after this change. It does provide for some reserves. I have itemized the new spending, which of course I was using the Appendix A from that we would be using. It moved technology infrastructure to come from capital, which is, we've already said. It also restores music funding. It removes the VP at mid-time, maintains community link, and returns funding for education assistance. So what I did when I prepared this is I started with option 8 and I made changes to that. So that's why these are the specific things that I speak to. That would be the change or the difference or the same as option 8. So if I can get the next slide. I wanted to speak to the available surplus and why I did choose to go and use available surplus. Surpluses are something that I think should be used at times when revenue is lower, and that's now. It is unfortunate that in the past, the surplus was used when revenues weren't at a loss. But there is also reasonable expectation that we will see an increase of revenues. We're going to have rentals open up, international students, and hopefully increased enrollment. So that we can expect will add surplus for next year. We also have to acknowledge, which we also heard in the letter from the Ministry of Education, that we do have opportunities to amend our budget throughout the year as we see enrollment. So at that time, we can make changes. So I just wanted to point that out. You'll see there where the utilized surplus in option 8 started at the 4 million too. I've reduced it from the tech residual that you'll see I come up with in the future here and the VP admin residual. So that's where the reduced amount for the surplus came from. So the next slide. Again, this provides for a reserve. I do think it's really important that we keep a reserve and that the board should create a goal to build a 3% contingency, as we've heard from Joan Oxford. But we need to do this slowly over time, acknowledging the position that we're in today. Today is probably, while we're at low revenues, not the time to focus on that. Again, conscious incremental planning over several years to allocate to that contingency. So we continue on to the next slide. And here I detailed the spending. I was working off of the appendix, and these were the things I was saying. I want to point out there is one addition that I added that is not in the appendix, and I added a line item for reconciliation and anti-racism training. We speak that we're very committed to that, but I think it's really important that you see that as a budget line item so that we know that the resources are there to do that. It's more than a commitment. We're really going to follow through. So I just wanted to note that that was a new spend and not in Appendix A. So we can go to the next slide. Again, remember I started at option 8, and in here, these are the proposed cuts and savings in this budget that I would pretty much, that's everything that was there before. What I did is I also cut the principal admin time and also the one district education assistant at Victor in hopes that they would be deployed further into the system. And then on the next slide is technology infrastructure. If you look at option 8, we are to fund that to the amount of 400,000, which I suggest moves to capital. I also noted, and obviously, Kim, you've just speak to it, that, you know, 1 million was budgeted to go to this expenditure in 2019, and those funds were diverted. So I do appreciate that there is a sense of priority for this. So I think in capital dollars, this does need to be a priority. I think Trustee Painter had made a comment too about making planning of those capital dollars, and we do see Lansdowne in the future. So I think that is something we can do. And then again, anytime that there was any residual from one of these calculations, I reduced that from the amount we were taking from surplus. So in this case, it worked out to the 81,000 because I'm taking this amount and adding it to the saving or to music, the extra music. So that brings us to the next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So I want to acknowledge, and I think everybody at this table does, that School District 61 has an amazing music program which benefits our students and our communities and our families in very profound and positive ways. There are so many ways that I'm not even going to try and list them. Music is not specifically funded by the Ministry of Education, and nor is it within our mandate, and therefore it has often come to this table when budgets are tight for cuts. But policy 6162.8 states that consultation must occur before eliminating program, and we're definitely seeing the kickback of people wanting that consultation. I think that music programs must be equitable and they must reflect the community interest and they must live within our means. So my thought is that we refund this, and through consultation, we review these programs and we find innovations and ways to evolve this program to meet our students' needs as well as being within our means. But I do think that it is appropriate that we have some proper consultation on that and not as part of a budgeting process. I don't think consultation to eliminate such a program or any programming should be done through budget. It should be done based on the program itself. And then the next slide in this budget, I removed the vice principal's admin time. Noting that we are going to be in a similar situation next year where we do have to find more efficiencies to balance next year's budget. We have talked about reducing the amount of vice principals in some of our smaller schools, especially. Reducing admin time and vice principals in our schools is a way to start moving in that direction. I also note that there are cuts to clerical in our schools, and that we might as a board want to have discussions about centralizing our administration and moving some of those tasks that are at our schools and bringing them to the head office to create more efficiencies in our tasks and remove some of those pressures, you know, the big stack of work that's data entry constantly, while they're also trying to talk to kids during recess and everything else. Maybe we can remove some of that pressure from our frontline workers through that. And that would be, of course, more budget discussions coming forward. So the next slide. On this one, I took the money to maintain Community Link. And within that, I did have the question. It does seem that this money, I don't really understand, and I would seek more advice on how it is that this money kind of shifts, right? Like I think we still have this money, but we want to put it to the family and youth counselors. So what are we going to lose in Community Link? But what I do want to acknowledge, and I don't think the public is completely aware, is that there are a lot of programs that we run now and allocate budget money to that amazing groups within our community are also supporting. So we are doubling up on that. And it is important for us to shift some of those funds to other areas because we're receiving valuable donations that are covering these things, and it's important for us to continue to build those partnerships. So again, I don't have that much information. I also note where in this line item in option 8, it said maintain Community Link and the reading recovery individual for $73,000. My thought on this is that we take that coordinator and put it within the $50,000 for literacy that we have allocated and budgeted out from there, and that those schools wishing to continue with the reading recovery program share those coordinator costs within the amounts allocated to them, and then continue to have those conversations about the literacy funding. But I think that there's adequate funding within the $500,000. So the next slide. So I also within this budget return the funding for education assistance. I think that education assistants are one of our best ways to support our vulnerable learners. They create caring learning environments. They help with classroom management. It's just the more adults that we can have interacting with our students, I think is great. So I take this money for educational assistance from the VP time, that expense anyway. So you can see there the calculation. I took the VP time, I took off the educational assistance, and I also fund the reconciliation and anti-racism training, and that reduced the amount that I took from the surplus. The next slide. Well, just before I go to that, I did want to say that my hope was within that return of those 5 full-time EAs, that those EAs were targeted to our schools that have the highest need. And I think that will support our most vulnerable learners the most, is to really focus that to those schools. So these, I don't know how this is going to work, new spending savings, because none of that's going to make sense anymore. But these were the things that this was the calculation starting with the 1.3 million there that you say is no longer was part of the budget. So this slide is not relevant at all. But these were the things that I thought that through the spending that we were saving. So the next slide. And there was my calculation of that all balancing, but that's not going to balance now. And then the next slide. I just wanted to note that the Appendix A was not exclusive of all the opportunities for savings that we had. So things that came to mind for me were a ban on travel and to reduce pro-D time for administration and leadership. We know we've done it all year. I know we want to get together and talk, but Zoom is the way to go, especially when we live on the island. The cost of travel to the Lower Mainland is very high. I would also like to cancel the eScribe service. I don't know about the rest of you, but it is supposed to be for trustees, and often I am lost. Nobody else is on eScribe or something happens. I think it was a good go, but I do think that our staff is posting the exact same thing on eScribe that they're doing for the public, and it seems like a duplication of work, especially when half the time the motions are coming from the floor. So I don't see the value in that. I also noted when I looked at the line by line item budget that the cell phones stood out to me glaring as a place that we need to take a look at that and see Is there any way we can reduce this expense? I note in my family that cell phone bills can just suddenly get away on you, and this one may have done that. We could also look at our senior administration and learning team to reduce the number of staff there. That is the farthest away from the classroom. Yes, it supports classroom teachers, but just keeping with that. We could also, another suggestion was made to continue to keep Sundance closed for one more year and to reduce the cost to operate an additional school. And there's lots more ideas. So putting that forward and hoping that we can, I guess we're going to have to play this game with the 1.3 million. But thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker, for your time and putting that all together for us. Trustee Ryan Painter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure how we're moving next. I guess I wanted to just provide my thanks to Trustee Whitaker. I had similarly over the weekend taken option 8 and tried to move some things around, and you have done a stellar job beyond what I was able to do. There were some things that were similar, but looking at your options, and there are some things that you brought in that I think are very good. So I'm not sure, through you, Chair, if we're moving to the spreadsheet or if we're able to. Yeah.
Is the board okay with having a look at Trustee Whitaker's option in the calculator? We all good with having that conversation?
I would like to. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Because Ms. Morris, I have no doubt you can show Anne's work.
Right.
And we can see where we got to go, and you can help us with implications.
Sure. I just want to make sure that I've captured it, Trustee Whitaker, and thank you so much. This is great work, in my opinion, in terms of moving us forward. So I believe we start out with the 8.7. I believe in your PowerPoint, you talked about keeping a reserve of 3495551. Is that correct?
Option 8, the reserve. Yeah, what did I write on it?
I think that's what I saw on one of your slides.
The reserve is 1,468,630. It was the same as option 8. I didn't touch it.
Sorry, 1468.
630. Trustee Rob Painter, I have you after we let Ryan Painter finish his. You're on your list, but let's just let Anne or Trustee Whitaker and Secretary Treasurer Morris.
Can you repeat the how much reserve you'd like to keep?
630.
600.
Oh, no. No, 1468630.
That's the reserve we'd like to keep. Okay, that leaves us with a remaining surplus of 4.189776 to apply to the shortfall. And that, using that 4.1 surplus would give us an updated shortfall of 5.6-ish. Have I captured your ads or your spends, Trustee Whitaker, totaling 718,000?
Yeah, that is what it was. That was based on the fact that you had the spend of 1.3 million in there. So we can cut more out of that, that's for sure.
Let's see what we end up with. My understanding from your presentation is that the reading recovery coordinator would be paid for out of the 500.
Yes.
Okay. And that you've added a new item, which is great, of the reconciliation and anti-racism, right?
Correct.
Okay. So with that new spending, we're looking for savings of 5.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to run through this list, Trustee Whitaker, to make sure I've captured what you wanted to do. So learning team, pathways and partnerships, enhancing learning grants, one learning community, 8750, 2922, 150, 297, 600, equity of opportunity at the reduced amount, technology refresh at 329, tech for learning staff reduction, clerical time at 96,994, vice principal time at 496,
yeah,
clerical at 342, gifted at 351-ish, education assistant at 42, international program at 592.
And then add the reading recovery that you had previous allotted at 73 will come off of here because it's in the 500.
Yeah. Okay. And I just want to make sure I've got this total right.
So aren't you going to put 73 in for savings, or is that not right?
I think I just did. Did I?
Or did you?
I thought I slid it over. Sorry.
What I saw you slide over, Ms. Morris, is the Indigenous education one. I don't know if that was intended.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's not there.
Okay.
Perfect.
So the amount we would still be looking for is $1 million.
Right.
From this scenario. And I just want to explain what I heard you ask a question about Link, Community Link.
Yeah, so because when I look at the appendix and I read the community look, it says moves costs from operating to special.
Yeah.
And so that maintains the district counselors. But then what happens to what it was paying? Like, what are we losing in this?
So if we don't use this line item at all, the counselor's line item, then Community Link is basically status quo with a couple of additions that Associate Superintendent Caldwell has made in terms of outreach workers and such. But it would largely leave Community Link status quo. We would not need to move this money from operating into Community Link. And it's important to recognize that Community Link savings is made up of three things. $300,000 in food, which we know may be or is well provisioned in schools through donations, Breakfast for Learning, and other grants and community contributions. The YFC amount in this amount is $196,731. So that may be, you may be willing to move some counselors into Community Link as long as it doesn't impact YFCs. And the remainder is principal, vice principal time or director time through the TOLMI change. So,
yeah, so
if we wanted to balance more and we wanted to leave YFCs, but we were okay with impacting food because we know we have a lot of budget for food or contributions, we may be able to move about 364 of this over to here.
yeah, that was sort of where I kind of was stuck on there. Is I am well aware that, and it was such gratitude, the amount of community organizations and individuals that support our students with meals is overwhelming and greatly appreciated. And that's where many of those organizations have come to me and said, well, how do I get this money to strings rather than, look, this is how we do it. Thank you for contributing in the way that you can in your business, because now we can divert those funds to counseling. So that's what I would like to see.
So if we're able to do that, if we take the full savings of those counselors less the YFC cost, we are able to add savings of $367,318. Is that amenable? And then the shortfall would be 716.
And I believe that we could also move the 10,000 from Pro D, the GV. Yeah, I think that would be good.
Sorry, I'm just moving Zoom menus out of my way.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, let me go to the spends.
Just want to thank trustees for your patience while we work through this option.
And I think the other easiest thing to do would be, I put in where none of those spends are in the budget that you're speaking of. If we take all those spends out, start there and then add back what we want. And then we should balance if we take out those spends. How's that? And then with some money to spare, and then we could figure out how to go from there. Right?
Yep, you're just about bang on within $1,000.
Yeah, and then that's where now the big work will have to come, because I really want that $50,000 back.
You could reduce.
But I took that from somewhere else, so I should still have that.
You could reduce the reserve if you like.
Or, yeah. Or
Or-
take from the surplus, because I believe I've added to it, right?
No, we said we'd like to use reserve of 1.5.
Okay, yeah, no, sorry.
And that leaves us 4.1 out of the existing reserve.
Right.
Or surplus to use, and that's incorporated in here. So no new spending. And then savings of 4.581 brings us within $1,000. So you could, if you wanted to add anything back, you could reduce this number here in terms of the reserve.
Which I personally am in favor of, but I want to make sure we get a chance to go around the table. Anne, have you gotten this option as far as you can without your colleagues' input?
I think so, but it kind of moves around. So I'm just where I took money from places and reallocated it. Do those reallocations then still stay, right? Because I took the VP time.
Yeah.
So there should have been that savings.
Yep.
So we still, and then I took that money and I put it to music, and then I put does that still reflect in there?
Yep. So we don't have any cuts to music. They're still way over here.
Sorry, there's people where you're pointing. So hang on, let me move.
I know it's kind of difficult.
Okay, good. As long as that's still in there, and my big ask is I would like to see that 50,000 for professional development for reconciliation and anti-racism to there it is. So that makes me happy. Okay. And then please let everybody go. Give her a whack.
So if we reduce this by 48,660, it should balance within $6.
But with no new spending.
Except there is new spending, and it is reconciliation and anti-racism in green.
A question of clarification. I had thought that Anne had rolled the reading recovery into the literacy.
Yeah, so if
500,000. So if we want that, that's got to move in, right?
Yes, or this has to move out as a savings, or it does move out as a savings if there's no new investment.
Yeah, there's no new investment. It's that it's part of the 500,000, right?
But we haven't spent the 500,000 now. So if you want to maintain reading recovery without the $500,000 investment, then it has to be moved back out of savings, which will increase the.
But if we want to reach our strategic goals, we need more early literacy funding. Trustee Ryan Painter, I think I just want to open this up to others. And then Rob Painter.
Yeah, I'm working through this and watching and writing at the same time as everyone here, trying to make this balance as best we can, and watching our Secretary Treasurer go up and down the screen so I can try to capture numbers. You know, I appreciate, and I guess just a couple questions of clarification so I have it clear in my mind, and maybe Trustee Whitaker can answer this, or the Secretary Treasurer could. With the yeah, so I guess we don't have the literacy put back in here, because for me, keeping the reading recovery coordinator is something I would very much like to do. I think that, you know, and I appreciate rolling that into the literacy support. So it's something, if the reading recovery was coordinator was rolled into the literacy supports, would that be the same as essentially reading recovery continuing as it has been previously, in order to allow us some time next year to consult? Because I notice Trustee Whitaker, I think correctly points to our bylaw around consultation for programming shifts. And I think reading recovery, to my mind, probably falls into that. So I just wondering if you can maybe clarify if we bring in this balanced literacy support of 500,000, we merge reading recovery in to be part of that. Does the reading recovery coordinator position and the implementation of that programming maintain as we've done it previously?
As we know, the reading recovery is made up of 3 components: the coordinator contract, the staffing that principals assign out of their school pack-up to reading recovery, and the district portion of reading recovery, which was a matching FTE. And that matching FTE from district was rolled into their school-based learning, their SBIL, and they have redeployed that. So if this were to go forward, they could reinstate based on restaffing or adjusting their staffing.
Okay, so then I think, to me, what I would, just as a first piece, I would like to see that balanced literacy support brought back in, with that reading recovery coordinator included. I think we need that. I think we need to maintain that, and then go through a consultative work group piece next year to see how we do reading recovery going forward. So that's just one piece, and I'm very happy to hear from other trustees. Obviously, this takes us out of balance, and I think it might mean that we want to draw down from more of our reserves. Since we have those reserves, I think we need to consider using them. So it would maybe help to just see what that looks like. Yep. And then the only other piece I want is I want the communications assistant brought back in as a new spend. And the reason why is because we are now going to move into a very purposeful and intentional consultation process around the budget next year, starting in the fall, as well as continuing our work on George J renaming and the school liaison officer piece, and as well as other important consultation pieces. We do a lot of district consultation in this district, and I think it would be, in my mind, helpful to have another person support that work, especially if we are considering moving next year into a more broad-ranging working session, work group, committee process around all of these different budget pieces. So for me, that's kind of where I would like to see that. And then again, perhaps this means drawing down on our reserves to make that balance. But yeah, maybe we can see what that looks like.
Yeah, so if I've got this right, I've returned the reserve back to its original state. I have added in spending under the communication assistant, as well as literacy, as well as the new 50,000 for reconciliation and anti-racism. So the spending is 616,945. The savings have not changed. And that leaves us 688,611. And we could add this back because it's taken out of the literacy, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Could be a savings.
Okay.
And so if we were to simply attend to that through reserve, your reserve would now be 853 and your bottom line would be balanced.
And just one, sorry, Chair, before we go back, just one final piece of clarification for me in terms of the YFC piece that we've put back in is, and I know we've heard a lot about Community Link, the YFCs, the George J family liaison. Would this essentially allow us to put back the family liaison position at George J? Because I know that is something urgently requested from the community, and I think it's something I would be interested to know if that just would include that piece, and if not, maybe we need to attend to that as well.
So the 564,050 original savings for counselors moving into Link has been reduced to 367,318 in order to keep the YFC budget intact in Community Link.
And so that would allow the family liaison position to return to George J?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Got Trustee Rob Painter, Trustee Leonard, Trustee McNally. I'll put myself on.
Thank you, Chair. And to tell the honest truth, I kind of feel like we're getting a little ahead of where I personally feel comfortable. I had continuing questions about what these allocations actually meant. And actually, I appreciate Trustee Painter's last question, because maintaining that family liaison position at George J is a really critical issue for me. So I was glad to get that clarification. But with the Chair's indulgence, I would like to ask questions about a few of the other ones and what the implications of moving forward with those cuts would actually have on, in schools in a practical sense.
Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
The purpose of this opportunity.
No, appreciate that. So the first question I had was about pathways and partnerships contingency. Now, for me, pathways and partnerships has to be one of the more successful programs that we're running in the district here. There is, every time we turn around, there are more successes associated with either students working on their apprenticeship, getting dual credit that way, students able to attend Camosun and possibly UVic, getting credits that way. And I think it's an amazing way that we are opening up opportunities. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of it is kind of, it's self-funding in that, if I'm not mistaken, we actually receive funding for from ITA for apprentices and otherwise. So my question is, what would the impact be on that program moving forward if we went without the 127? It seemed like it would
answer the question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we know that Pathways and Partnerships has provided great revenue and great opportunities for students. We know that they've had a consistent carry forward year over year, which we've tried to reduce and move more to a model of ins and outs in terms of revenue and expense, almost like international in terms of trying to track their revenue and their expenses. So right now in the budget, Pathways and Partnerships are balanced in terms of their revenue is matched to their expenses. The purpose of the 127,392 is simply to hold a contingency in case that enrollment doesn't prove out in the fall, similar to all of the, let's call it risk we take with enrollment projections. So there is no real impact on the program. This was just a pot of money that was going to be held in case the revenue came in lower. But as we know, as our enrollment fluctuates between preliminary and amended, we make changes to the budget all the time. So in my opinion, there is no impact to the program if we take advantage of this savings.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if it had to do specifically with enrollment in the different partnership programs, but this is, it's right across the board. So that's great.
Good question.
The next one I was wondering about is the Equity of Opportunity program. The one sort of bit that I was able to parse out was that some funding, the 240, was going to ECEs in Strong Start K classes or K classes that supported Strong Start. What were the other programs or projects that were supported through this this past year?
There were a myriad of programs given the injection of funding and the treatment by us as new revenue. I don't know the specifics. I wonder if Deputy Witten, as Deputy Superintendent Witten, would like to comment or at all on the other items in the Equity of Opportunity in the 2021 budget.
Through the chair. So I can speak to the funds that were used this year, Trustee Painter. Secretary Treasurer Morris says it was extensive, some of which were one-time costs, but we did allocate funds to GVTA for professional learning. We had mental health and literacy learning series for K through 12, physical literacy series with our grade 6 and 7 schools, as well as elementary schools. We did teen mental health, secondary mental health workshops. Some of our snapshot costs came from EOS. We had social emotional wellness advocates, community partnerships, so where we had a community fair with our partners and stakeholders within the community. Mindfulness for educators, children and youth in care had funds to support supports in schools. We had CERT training, VICHA training, counselor collaboration, second step, which was brought in through all K through 6 or K through 5. We had human nature that occurred at Shoreline, Esquimalt, and Craigflower, crisis prevention intervention, and complex student supports, as well as our EA professional learning series. And our MDI cost was paid through EOS. And we had a literacy assessment for grades 3, 5, and 8 that we were working on to create a common assessment. And we also allocated some extra admin FTE at Craigflower, Quadra, and George J.
Wow, that's impressive. The first thing that comes to mind is that quite a number of those, like for example, not to pretend that I got them all, but second step I understood was a significant part of our mental well-being sort of strategy at the K to 5 level, and some of these other ones I don't know if the complex student support reflects the Compass proposal that was, if that's something different entirely, but it does feel like and the child in care one is another one that touches on. It does feel like there's a lot that we would be going without if this package was taken away. It almost feels like we could benefit from looking at that in a slightly more granular way. But one question I did have was this like a one-time only grant from the ministry? It's not, we're not getting this again?
So the money was new in 2021. It was a new line item, and most of it was shifted, or some of it was shifted from the old, what we would have called BC Education Plan or curriculum and planning line item in the operating grant. It increased significantly for the 2021 school year. We do know that in our district, because of our rich surpluses, we treat it as new money and put many initiatives into place that would have been taken up in other budgets elsewhere. And we know that most districts did not treat it as new money and simply rolled it into their block. And so it would be, in my opinion, rich to continue to use the whole thing as new money. We've taken 240,000 out of it, out of the savings here to provide for the early learning framework. I think what might be a more opportune way to address it might be some spending for the learning team in terms of some of those initiatives up here. I'm not sure if that makes more sense, but it would be not in keeping with what other districts have done, and that doesn't matter, we're unique in not treating it as part of the block.
Okay.
Sorry, if I may, Trustee Painter, some of these things were, like second step is continuing, but we bought the resources. So we purchased all of the resources enough for schools. And so that was the one time. The actual programming is continuing. So some of these, while they sound like they wouldn't continue if we didn't put that money there, they are. So appreciate your concern, but I also want to state that many of these are continuing just in a different fashion or as they were years before.
Okay, thank you. That does put my mind at rest.
I think we did go over this in the working sessions as well, so you may have some notes if you attended.
Thank you. I will refer to my notes. Those are I think the big ones that I really wanted to go over, especially the equity of opportunity, simply because of its magnitude.
Yeah.
And the one question I did have was about the district education assistant reduction at Victor. Was there a specific rationale for why this position was identified as being no longer required at Victor?
We know that Victor has less than 20 students and it had 13 EAs in the status quo budget. So this takes them down to 12, recognizing that as student identified needs come in through the 1701 data collection in September, that any additional needs will be attended to through staffing as always, as with the rest of our IEP students.
Yes, there was something about. I'm sorry. Thank you. There was a question I had about staffing, but until I can remember it, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Okay, I have Elaine next. Sorry, I should have said that with more confidence. Trustee Leonard, you are next on the speakers list.
Thank you. I want to thank Trustee Whitaker for her work on this. I too had been going over different options on the weekend, but I really appreciate you bringing this forward. It follows very much along the lines that that I was looking at myself. So as it's before us now, and trustees are having the opportunity to discuss it, I would hope that Trustee Whitaker, because of her work involved, would put it forward as a motion on the floor so that we could enter into full debate on the options before us. And then if people did not want to support this one, then we would move to another option. But that's I'm liking the options that she's not liking. I'm supporting the options that have been put forward tonight as farthest away from the classroom and something that our public has talked to us about and has been taken into consideration with what's in front of us. So thank you very much, Trustee Whitaker.
Trustee Rob Painter. Okay,
yes.
Actually, I assume you're wanting to respond to Trustee Leonard, but I am going to stick to the speakers list.
Sorry, it was just, I finally remembered the last point.
Okay, can I put you at the back? Because I'm going to go to Trustee McNally. I won't forget you, Rob Painter. Trustee McNally.
Thank you. Well, I'm just, I'll start out by saying I'm astounded with the work that Trustee Whitaker has done. This is not something that my skills could originate, so I'm in awe. So as Trustee Ryan Painter pointed out before, wanting to know if Layla Dursey's George J. Family Support position was still funded. That's of supreme importance to me. I'm just going to go.
I think it's important that we not be talking about individual staff positions, though,
yeah,
like individuals. I totally appreciate that is what you're talking about, but just let's be mindful of that.
The George J. Family Counselor position, in my opinion, must be retained, and I'm echoing Trustee Ryan Painter on that. I would, for me, I would add in targeted money for the Reading Recovery Coordinator because it's going to just slide away into something else if we don't do that. I would add an extra expense, and this isn't reinvestment. It's going to cost more money. As in school district 62 and 63, we would pay as a district, pay the whole shot for a half-day teacher in any school that wanted to have reading recovery and not cap it at 14 schools and not compel schools to, be stuck between a rock and a hard place and have to take a quarter of a teacher's salary out of their school allocation.
Do you have a sense of the costing of that, or?
Pardon me?
Do you have costing?
Of course I don't.
Yeah, okay.
Other people here are the accountants, like maybe Trustee Whitaker or our Secretary Treasurer. I would like to know if I actually saw $10,000 taken from GVTA professional development.
The amount of October District Pro D Day is a district budget to help plan and carry out the district day in the fall.
So yes, but is that something that's gone or is that staying with us?
That is not in the spending right now, so it is gone.
Okay, well, I would definitely argue that that shouldn't be gone. The GVTA Pro-D fund has been an issue for a very long time, and there's a little opportunity for teachers to do professional development. So I would add that back in. I do not think we need another communications person. What we need is more of this kind of arduous, kind of messy consultation with conclusions coming from our staff who are presently here. So I would speak against another communications assistant. I would add back in gifted support. Gifted students are not just fine on their own. They need support. Any EAs that are cut, I would add them back in. And I have a question about the Indigenous clerical hours being reallocated. What is that?
So that is currently not a savings item. It is going to remain the same in this particular scenario, and that is that half of the clerical support for the Indigenous Education Department is paid for from the block, and the other half is paid from targeted funds. If this savings were to be recognized, the entire 100% of the clerical salary would be paid for from the Indigenous targeted funding. But as it stands, this is not a savings item that is in the scenario right now. So it remains status quo, half paid by the block, half paid by the Indigenous Education.
Thank you. If that did come up again though, as a savings where that position, excuse me, getting a dry throat, where that position were to be shifted toward, not shifted toward, if the funding were to be taken from Indigenous Education Department, what services to students would be lost? I want to know how to proceed with my thoughts about the possibilities.
So what it would mean is that there would be $27,787,000 left in the targeted funding to be able to attend to some of the services and supplies and staffing that the Indigenous Education Committee normally does. And I don't know if Associate Superintendent Roberts or Ms. Nemi would like to comment on what that lost service would be, but as it stands now in this, it is not part of the, it's not part of the savings.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll just leave it until if any other consideration comes up. Thank you.
Can we get before we move on to Trustee Duncan, if this is okay with you, Trustee Duncan, because you are next on the list. I'm wondering if it would be good at this moment to sort of have a recap of where we are. Would that help you focus your comments, Trustee Duncan, or would you like to go first?
No, I think that would help the assembly and I'm happy to wait.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Okay, so if we took this option and we added back the EA time and we added back, sorry, it doesn't, the EA time is saved here. But if we moved, if we did not save the 42,084 or the gifted, I believe those were the two. I don't know how to cost the reading recovery because the question was whatever school wanted it, and that's not known tonight. 66945 for the communications assistant would be gone, and 10,000 more would be added in. And so we'd be looking for 335,000 more savings.
So, but can you go over what is
with
just recap the whole thing for me?
Sure.
I know there's some things that are moving back and forth, and at a certain point we'll need to stop and move something forward to debate amendments, but just to have like a,
so we're here.
Where are we on our reserve and everything?
We're here with our shortfall. We're here with our reserve at 853, leaving a remaining surplus to apply of 4,805, leaving an updated shortfall of 3.966. The proposed new spending before Trustee McNally was 616,945, bringing our shortfall up because we have new spending of 4.5.
And so the new spending there is communications assistant, the full 500,000 for literacy, and the 50,000 for reconciliation and anti-racism training. Correct?
Exactly. And so that leaves us with a shortfall of 4.5, and the savings listed here make up the 4.5, and we are balanced. If we were to take into account Trustee McNally's changes, we would be looking for an additional 335,640, and I can build that out if you like.
Chair, could I just ask that I made a mistake on the $10,000 Pro D. I didn't realize which Pro D offering that was attached to.
Yeah.
So I just would not add that back in.
Okay, Trustee Leonard, I see your hand, but I was going to go to Trustee Duncan, and I have myself on there after her. And then we can go to you. Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. I guess first right off the top, just to clarify the options that we've got on the table. First around reading recovery. So I wanted to clarify that the proposal before us does in fact include the status quo FTE for reading recovery that is currently being provided by the district to support schools that have reading recovery currently. And so I just want, so that was my first, go ahead.
Yeah. So reading recovery is made up of three components: the coordinator of 73,000, the staffing that principals allocate to teacher reading recovery teachers out of their school allocation. And the third component in a status quo budget is assigned FTE for those schools choosing reading recovery to match their teacher FTE. That district portion, that matching staffing, is still with schools. We didn't take that away because we need it to meet ratio. But schools have deployed that in other ways, whether they've chosen as much reading recovery as they've had in the past or more is up to the individual principal. But the staffing remains in the district in terms of ratio. What principals have chosen to do, or if reading recovery were added back in terms of the coordinator, what they would choose to do with their staffing backup may change.
Okay, so thanks for that clarification. That's great to know. My other question was around Community Link. And so we know that for at least 5 years we've run surplus, so we've not spent all of the Community Link funding in our district. And so I'm wondering whether or not the amounts that we're considering tonight and that we've heard on and off over the last sort of month or so include a calculation of that surplus. So are we now going to spend the entire Community Link allocation that we receive? And if not, is there some more surplus in Community Link that we can discuss as a board how to allocate?
The Community Link budget right now is fully expended in plans for 21-22, including the $200,000 carry forward from 2021. The change that is proposed tonight is to only move $367,000 of counselors to Community Link in order to keep the YFC budget in Community Link intact. And the impact on Community Link budget would be to reduce food, as we had discussed, and to reduce that principal/director staffing.
And so can you clarify for the board then what the surplus amount has been allocated to in this budget?
It's been added to the revenue we received for 21-22 and deployed throughout all the initiatives of Community Link. Unless Associate Superintendent Caldwell has some other information, that's my understanding.
So we've just topped up existing allocations with the surplus that we would normally have at the end of a school year in Community Link. Is
In
that
our
right?
special purpose funds, we take what our next year's revenue is, plus any carry forward, and develop a spending plan based on the total amount available.
So it's in a kind of communal pot, so to speak, to be drawn on. I see. Okay. So is that not money that the board can consider allocating towards some of our strategic plan goals, I guess is what I'm getting at and why I wanted to unpack that.
Right. So we have to remember that LINK stands for Learning Involves Nutrition and Knowledge. And so we have to be careful because it's a targeted fund. We can't simply assign what we want there. It has to meet the policy requirements of a special purpose fund.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I would like to see the board have a discussion, if it's not tonight, then at some point soon about, you know, how we could use that. It's, you know, Community Link along with equity of opportunity. My understanding is that both of those grants are targeted. So there's rules around how we should spend it and what we should target. And so I guess that leads me to my other question, which was around another targeted fund. So the equity of opportunity grant. I'm wondering, you know, the current plan foresees us using 718,000. That isn't the full amount of the grant from what I recall from previous options. So what does that leave in then? So, because again, this is an area where my understanding is that these are funds that are meant to help us as a district target, in particular, our most vulnerable students. And so I'm wondering whether or not you can speak to the portion that is not listed here, where that's going, and then whether or not we've thought about the lost opportunity, I guess, to allocate some of these funds to some of our strategic plan goals.
So I think you heard Deputy Superintendent Whitten explain what was in this year's equity of opportunity funding and what items we're able to carry on in next year's funding. And the amount that this was reduced by to get to the 718 is $240,000, which is to continue with the ECE pilot program connected to Strong Start schools in kindergarten classrooms. And that's the issue, not the issue, but that's the reduction there, is to maintain 240,000. We had originally said 40, but we're getting good results with that. And the spend this year was about 240 is my understanding. And so we're trying to maintain that program as a pilot for another year to have a look to see if we want to systematize that or expand it.
That's great. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
In terms of the lost opportunity of, you know, not fully utilizing the grant, kind of using it to help balance the budget and not allocating it to what it's meant to target, I'm wondering, you know, really whether or not we can maybe through a working group discuss that so that we can look forward and maybe do some planning so that we're not doing that. The other question I had was around the other options. So I'm keen that we have some other options that are also, you know, take us away from having to reduce even to the extent that we are currently in this revised option 9, the direct supports to students. And so I'm wondering if you can give us some idea of what options there would be around reducing travel, so like a travel ban, reducing Pro-D, cell phones. That is certainly an item and a line item budget that I've mentioned a few times, and it would be good to get some context, so that we can understand maybe why that line item is so incredibly high. There may be some really good reasons that we're just not aware of.
Yeah, I wanted to interject there. I think you asked the same question about the, as we were moving toward year end, I think you've asked the same question on the monthly financial report that comes to the board or to ops. And so that is largely unspent until there's a one-time annual payment to the province for our NGN network, our next generation network, which is a key piece of our infrastructure. It's unfortunate that it's named under cell phones. It's a little bit, that's just our GL structure. It's quite limited, and so it appears under there, but there really is no choice. Without that $590,000 payment to the government, we would have no internet, or we would not have the speed of internet that we have, or we'd have to find another provider. So while that budget looks really big because it's called cell phones, it does include $600,000 of network infrastructure that we pay to the government, as all school districts do.
So just to be clear then, that line item is for cell phones and also for network connectivity lumped into one, because it's almost $1 million line item.
Yes, so the cell phones would be approximately 400,000 of that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so going back to my question then, we're moving away from cell phones for a moment, although I think it's important for us to note that the way that we're noting our expenses, we might want to look at that. But in terms of Pro-D and travel, I'm wondering if you can give us an indication of to what extent you've already considered some of those options as ways to reduce expenditures and move us away from the classroom.
We have not considered those. We've talked about Pro-D before in the FAQ about how difficult it is to pull that out because, again, given our GL structure, the travel and Pro-D are rolled into one account. And so we would need to separate those out. And that may be something we want to discuss in a working group, is the travel, et cetera. But overall, we have not considered that in this year's budget. And I don't know that I have a number for that.
We don't have a combined account amount for the allocation?
I don't at the top of my head, no.
Okay, all right, thank you. It would be good to get that because I think we need to have that conversation. Thanks.
I don't know if, can I just ask if Associate Superintendent Caldwell wanted to speak to what's in the Community Link budget right now? If the YFCs there are a number of initiatives in that Community Link budget that may answer some of Trustee Duncan's questions. Mr. Caldwell?
Hi, through the chair. Pretty much as you've said, Secretary Treasurer, we have spent or allocated the entire budget out. That did include bringing into the Community Link. They are not district counselors, they are school-based counselors. So we have to make that clarification. So those positions are basically our elementary school-based counselors who are teachers in buildings. Their funding was moved to Community Link to support our elementary counselor framework that we developed about 3 years ago through the strategic plan. If you were to remove some of that back into the block funding, then we would have room to allocate more funding back to the schools that have been reduced. I do want to say that we moved approximately a $200,000 carry forward from this year into the budget allocation for what we've done. Other items that come out of the Community Link funding include our outreach workers that are supporting our most vulnerable students that are disengaged from school because of COVID and other issues in our community at this time. And they are in addition to what we've typically done with our other supports. We did fund those outreach workers through a mental health grant this year, and they will be 12-month employees as well. So by moving out some of that funding for the school-based elementary counselors, we could accommodate that funding towards other youth and family counselors as well. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. I appreciate you following up. May I ask, Chair, just one more question around Pro-D?
Please do.
Thanks. So I just wanted to move back to this question of Pro-D, and I appreciate that you don't have a number right now for Pro-D and travel, and that there's some challenges unpacking that particular line item so that you can separate out travel and Pro-D. I'm wondering when you are able to bring back a figure to the board, if you would consider to whether we have any projections of having more in-service Pro-D where there's expertise in our district that can be shared, where we have staff that can through Pro-D share their what they're doing with their colleagues, and other measures like that. I'm not suggesting we have no Pro-D. What I'm suggesting is that we maybe do our Pro-D slightly different, rather than bringing in outside facilitators, for instance, which might be quite pricey, that we look to the expertise within our district and sharing that knowledge within our district to reduce costs, but still provide some enriching Pro-D.
I would invite, if it were me, I would invite superintendent or a deputy superintendent to speak to that. I'm sure that is taken into account, but I don't know the details of that.
Superintendent Green?
So I am aware that we have utilized and have an incredible team that provides a great deal of our Pro-D, and doing that at all levels from school to district, and have had very robust Pro-D opportunities utilizing our internal staff, from teachers to district people on a significant basis. And Deb, I think that has been in the planning even for next year.
Yes, through the chair, we do have expertise throughout the district that we have utilized, and I'd like to also point out that we have offered professional development across the province. So not only are we learning from our expertise within the district, but we're also offering that out, particularly at the middle years level across provincial with other partners and districts, in order to also enhance our own learning. So it is this year in particular with COVID, we've done it at a very, very low cost, and we'll continue to do that as one of the benefits or one of the learnings we've had through this year.
Thanks so much for that added depth. It would be great to get a sense of how that factors into from a dollars and cents point of view, and into the cost of Pro-D and potential options for reducing our costs, and again moving it out of the reductions away from the classroom. So thanks.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you. I'm learning more and more with every trustee's set of questions. I'm feeling fairly good about where we are with this. My main concern is, especially as we look to improve student success, is you want to go, rather than pulling the kids out of the river, you want to go down and see why they're falling in. And so I'm looking at the Strong Start Learning Center supplement and the early learning framework on the new spending list, which relatively are fairly low dollar items.
Can I just clarify something?
Yes, please.
Sorry, the early learning framework was originally in as a spend of 40, but we know that is far less than we were spending this year. And so rather than have it as a spend, what I saw Trustee Whitaker choose was to reduce the savings of equity of opportunity by 240. So the early learning framework is attended to in this amount here by not having it be $900,000. So just a clarification for you.
Good night. And with the strong start,
Yes, the strong start is important. As collective agreement increases have happened, the ministry funding of the special purpose grant Strong Start does not increase. And so we are forced to cover out of operating some of the increases that happen in our special purpose, simply to be able to keep the Strong Start centers open for the hours that they're supposed to be open, given that our wages increase per our collective agreements.
I just say it's so typical that it would be finally my time to turn to ask questions, and then all my kids have to come into the room to say goodnight. So it's the typical mom life. So I would really like to move that Strong Start Learning Center supplement over into our spending column. I don't know if that throws us all out of balance, but that's something that I really care about. And in terms of finding savings, I don't know if there's a little bit we can chip off somewhere else. But I just think it's so important. I don't know, where does that get us to?
32,000 deficit. So you could choose to reduce or increase, take something from this list, if you like, or a portion of something.
Oh, everything is so important. It's very challenging. I don't know, does anybody else feel as strongly as I do about the early learning piece? We could always move it in and maybe have that debate more fully.
Can I ask a clarification of the Secretary Treasurer?
You betcha.
Well, because I am seeing like a couple of these initiatives, and I want to express as well, like I think that they are important, but they're like new initiatives, and I'm struggling that these are things that should be funded by ministry, especially when you're talking about the early learning framework, and again the Strong Start. I mean, I know I have a motion coming about putting these things into a need budget to advocate for, but I really wonder why our focus has, I mean, I know that early learning is really important, but I almost feel like, are we ahead of the ministry's funding on this? Are we trying to get a head start of them? And should we be waiting or looking, what is the provincial plan for these things? Like there cannot be an expectation from ministry for us to implement and create all this curriculum, which is their new push, right? There was definitely funding for the new curriculum that we put out through K-12. So why is that not there for early learning?
No, I totally agree. And I think that we as school districts, and certainly in our school district, fill in gaps all over the place. I mean, look at mental health and youth mental health. I mean, that's MCFD, and we're having to put a lot of dollars into that because the services just aren't there in the community, right? So we're filling gaps all over the place. It certainly isn't just early learning, but I think you're exactly right. Like we are ahead of the ministry on this. At the same time, like I'm kind of glad we're ahead of the ministry. Like the early learning piece is super important. And for $32,000, you know, I do wonder if, you know, a little.
Oh, there's a much larger part than the 32 million that is not being covered, right? Oh, maybe there's only 40 there, but I just know, I mean, that's 72,000 for the early learning piece altogether. Anyway, I don't know if the superintendent has any comments of any initiatives that are coming forward in this. What is going on at the ministry level?
Certainly have heard that the ministry is going to be looking at early learning, and of course, before and after school care comes a part of that. They haven't given us any specific information on what that funding will be or the actual expectations of what the district will create. We certainly are waiting for that, and we have heard that's part of their mandate. And I expect that to come into our budgeting for looking at that for next school year, but we haven't seen any details yet. Strong Start in itself is that older piece, as we've talked about, where we've continued on and not necessarily the funding has increased to match the increases that we've experienced or the cost that it takes to replenish parts of those pieces. So that funding hasn't been a part of those components, and the district has taken that on.
Okay, and so then I'm going to ask the same question of the superintendent on mental health, where I think
thought it was my turn to speak.
Oh,
Guys, just go ahead, ask your question. You're asking my questions. It's fine.
Yeah, because I'm aware that we've come to the end of mental health funding through the ministry, and I am expecting that they're going to talk. I mean, that something is going to happen. We keep hearing in the winds that something's happening, and I'm wondering if, you know, are we thinking that we're going to do something when something does, other than let's just, you know, I'm assuming that the Ministry of Education is coming forward with some initiatives rather than just moving people to mental health and addictions.
We certainly expect, as we've seen in the past, initiatives coming forward, and mental health is absolutely one of it because it is part of their mandate. And so we haven't seen anything on a funding component yet, but we do expect to see something.
Can I just ask for Associate Superintendent Caldwell again to clarify the years of mental health funding? I know it's not much, but maybe you could just update us on, I think we are expecting year 3 of a nominal amount in 21-22, but maybe I'm wrong.
Through the chair, I am assuming that we are expecting a small amount again for year 3. We did have about a $27,000 grant the first year. Almost a $50,000 grant this year, and our third year would be coming up. Now that's my understanding, and I would not expect a huge amount of money. One of the parts of these grants is that the ministry is expecting us, if we are trying something, that we can build it into our framework. And that was part of the outreach worker funding that we did, was to build that into the framework, because that was part of the grant funding that we received at one-time funding for the $48,000.
Thank you. So I've got Trustee Leonard next on the speakers list, and I can move around. But again, I just want to thank all my colleagues for your contributions.
Thank you. I think we've heard from most everybody, and I think that the way forward in previous budgets that I've worked through is that you actually put an option on the table, and then if people want to amend an option, then they can. I'm quite happy to put this on the table, but knowing the work that Trustee Whitaker put in, I would give her the option of moving it if she wishes to, but otherwise I would put it on the table. So I'll ask Trustee Whitaker what she would like to do at this point in time.
May I just interject? The scenario is not balanced right now.
Oh.
It requires $32,000 if we're to add back the Strong Start.
I would suggest that at this point in time, we take it out of surplus reserve.
Okay.
Are we able to then go back and look at the changes that we've made and vote on those changes? Like,
well, I from previous experience that I've been around, you look at this, and people either move to put in or take out options by motion once it's on the floor. But the way that it was moving back and forth, I don't think is conducive to a healthful conversation unless you have something on the floor that you're working with that's a tangible item, which would be an option for a motion for this option.
Yeah, so what we would be looking for is the mover and seconder for a recommendation back to the board if this option is one that we want to put on the floor. And then the board would debate this option when it returns to its regular meeting.
So again, yes, we can amend it, but I'll turn to Trustee Whitaker. I know that the work that you put in to get this one on the floor. Did you want to move it or not?
I'm not up for, I don't care about ownership. Go for it.
Okay, I put this option on the floor for the board to consider.
Excuse me, Chair. I've been trying to be patient on the speakers list for quite some time, and I would like to speak before we move ahead.
So we have a motion on the floor with a mover and seconder, and you can certainly speak to the motion. And then we're going to have an opportunity to vote on whether we want to read the bylaw, and then our partners would have a chance to talk, and then we would have, there will be several more opportunities to go around. But there is a motion on the floor. So if you would like to, I think Trustee Leonard's given her rationale for moving this recommendation to the board for us to work through in a more formal process. If you'd like to speak to that, please go ahead.
I think, Chair, we need a seconder.
Trustee Ryan Painter seconded.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so I will be speaking against the proposal. I do thank my colleagues for their input. To start with, I do not support an additional communications assistant. There is currently at Tommy a regular clerical person who is able to switch tasks between
Trustee
clerical
Painter.
and supporting the communication assistant. So I don't see this being necessary.
So may I help support with please don't be frustrated. I'm doing my best. What we're debating on now is whether we move this to formal debate. So I'm not looking for debate on the option so much as, do you think it's ready to move it out? And if you're not ready to move it out, I understand,
no,
but I just don't want to go through each of the details because we're going to go through them in a minute where we can vote on amendments and move them. Do you know what I mean?
Point of order, Chair. I don't understand what you mean by move it out.
So right now we're in committee.
Anything passed here is passed as a regular part of the meeting. Remember that for informal consideration.
So, Chair, my challenge is that up until now, everyone has had the opportunity to discuss this in an open manner, go back and forth. What you're saying now is that my opportunity to have that same privilege is gone, and I will get a chance to speak on the issues one at a time, but I won't be able to speak to the entire thing as other trustees have.
You were the first speaker, I think.
I was the first speaker.
And now we have, you were the first speaker, and now we have a mover and a seconder. And I don't actually control when motions are moved, so I'm just trying to follow the rules of order. Maybe the Secretary Treasurer could help us out, because I'm definitely not trying to limit your participation. And I really enjoyed your comments at the beginning.
So we have a recommendation on the floor, and it is debatable before it is voted on. And then if the recommendation is voted on and the majority vote for it, then the committee or the whatever kind of meeting we're in may want to make a recommendation to move out of this type of committee back into the regular meeting in order to debate. But this is if we're treating this as a committee recommendation, it can be debated.
Point of clarification, if I may.
Please go ahead, and then Trustee Whitaker.
Sorry, I'm just a bit lost in the process here. Like, I don't understand if Rob still has, moving around to do. I don't see the benefit of leaping in, taking this where we've been very freely moving things back and forth and moving this out of our informal. I can't remember what Trustee McNally's words were, back into the thing, and then we have to do it more formally. Like, can we not just stay? I know there's a motion on the floor, but so I guess I'm speaking maybe against moving this now and spending a bit more time discussing this before we then have to do it point by point and more.
So
formal.
I think.
Can I help us with process here?
Please.
Sure. Okay, so because I think what's happened, I appreciate that Trustee Leonard and Trustee Painter have put the motion on the floor, but I think what should have happened first is that the motion to move out of the discussion that we're having now should have happened first. So if we can hold the motion of the option and go back to deciding whether or not it is time to move out. I think we just jumped ahead there. So if Trustee Leonard would allow, I would just like to, I think that we just need to hold off on that motion and come to it in a minute. But we have not as a group decided that we are finished our conversation, right? And thus Trustee Painter is going, I didn't finish my conversation. So if we can just maybe give that question and ask trustees.
Okay.
Then vote out and then do that motion.
Thank you so much for that, Trustee Whitaker. If I may, I think what I was thinking we were doing was capturing this as a snapshot. Here's an option that everybody's had some say into. Let's move that forward to the board, and then we can decide if we want to build other things or do other things before we move out of committee. So I suppose it's half dozen of one or six of the other, and I'm happy to go with the will of the assembly. I'll let Trustee Leonard, as the mover, decide if she wants to withdraw with the permission of the committee, and we can entertain a motion to move out. These process pieces again that slow us down.
Yeah, I know. What I was not hoping would happen is that other options would become on the table, and then you couldn't add or subtract to one that was before you, and you were dealing with up to 9 different options in front of you. And so that was what I was hoping to gain from the conversation, was to keep us focused on where to the point we have gotten to now, which I think is admirable, and moving us forward in a logistical way. So if everybody wants me to delay my motion for a few minutes, I'm happy to do that.
Perhaps may I take just a informal temperature check?
Plug in. Thank you.
Trustee Painter, just so you know, you're not muted. Not that it matters, but just in case. You, may I just informally ask how many trustees have an objection to this particular option moving forward to further debate? Okay, so I'm seeing that there's a significant majority of trustees who are feeling pretty comfortable with this option. So
Chair,
that's making me feel good about maybe moving on and letting our partners weigh in on where we're at before we start debating and amending it.
Point
Go
of
ahead,
order.
Trustee McNally.
Yeah, Chair, point of order. All you have to do is say, before the main question is disposed of, the informal consideration can be brought to an end by adopting a majority vote, a motion that the regular rules of debate be enforced. That's it. And then we go back to each having one turn. And I'm just going to slide in something here. I don't see the superintendent's discretionary fund, which I think is about $1 million. So that doesn't appear to be on the block. And
okay, we have a motion on the floor for which that is not related. So the motion is to recommend the current option for the board to debate, and then we could, as you say, make the motion to move back to regular rules. So I'm going to call the question on whether we want to move this option forward for debate, recommend it to the board for debate. All those in favor? Trustee, okay, all those opposed? Trustee Whitaker, or all those abstaining?
I will abstain because I'm fine with 5 minutes to allow people to talk.
So the motion carries. And then if we want, we can, I would entertain a motion to return to regular rules, if that's what we call it. Thank you, Trustee Leonard, Trustee Ferris. Any discussion? Trustee Duncan?
Yeah, I just wondered if you would maybe clarify for our stakeholders and rights holders when they're going to have an opportunity to speak to this option.
So in the next section, there is perhaps Secretary Treasurer, if you want to, you can explain this. I can go ahead, but
yeah,
you've done a good job of it.
So what we would do now, if the motion has carried, we would ask for a motion to move back into the board meeting where the board can debate option, I'm calling it 9.
I think that's the motion that's on the floor right now, except for because we're using Trustee McNally's language, that we're just moving back to regular rules as opposed to out of committee.
Right.
Yes, I understand that. Thank you, Trustee McNally. I appreciate your skill with Roberts. So am I correct that then we would have a motion to read the bylaw? And if that passes, then we would invite all of our stakeholders to provide their thoughts on the option in front of us. And then we would debate the option and amend it. Is that correct?
Yes.
So like move out of committee and then there's one more hoop and then we hear from everybody.
Yes.
And I'm also going to suggest we have a quick bio break in between.
Somewhere in this process, like between today and tomorrow, because I'm assuming we aren't passing this completely tonight, will staff be able to go and bring us back more information tomorrow just on these nigglies? That is that part of this in here?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just recognizing that everybody is going flat out and that there's a limit on the information, but I assume that's what the plan is, correct? Secretary Treasurer Morris, Superintendent?
So far I have Prody and travel to bring back.
And e-scribe if you can, just because that's a niggly for me.
Okay.
We don't get along.
I'm with you on that now. Okay, so we have a motion to move out or to return to regular rules, correct? Everybody's clear on what the process is? Thanks, everybody. Is there any debate? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Actually, did I already call this? I did already call this and it passed, right? Because Trustee Whitaker abstained.
She abstained from the recommendation for option 9.
Okay. Okay. So the new motion, I apologize to everybody. All those in favor? Just making sure I'm not calling the same vote twice. All those opposed? So that's Trustee Painter opposed. Any abstentions? Trustee McNally. Okay, so the motion carries. Would everybody be okay with a 2-minute break or 5-minute break? Is that a problem for anybody? Is that good? Okay, let's come back to order. I'll need a motion mover and a seconder. Trustee Whitaker, Trustee Leonard, all those in favor? Let's call it 5 minutes. We'll be back here at 8:48. Thanks, everyone.
Wait, Chair?
Yes.
I'm just wondering, is it possible to put the Excel spreadsheet back on the table for the break so that we can just have some time to see what it looks like?
You betcha.
Thank you. Thanks.
Can you see it?
No, I see emails.
Thank you. Do you want to answer some of them for me?
Totally.
Okay. How's that?
That's perfect. Are you able to minimize the top part?
To try.
For Zoom. That's correct.
It's pretty close. Are you okay with the 8.7 disappearing?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry. How small you want it?
I'm just trying to see, is reading recovery the last thing on the,
Reading recovery is paid for. Go ahead with your recess. I'm happy to stay on here and.
is it the last thing, is it the last line? A reading recovery coordinator contract out of literacy, 73,000. Is that the last?
Yeah, so we said that reading recovery coordinator would come out of the literacy up here.
Okay.
And so we were able to add it as a savings down here.
Okay, perfect. I was just trying to look at what I could view.
Sure.
So if you just scroll it up a little bit, then I can see all of the green and the blue. Thank you. That's perfect.
That's great.
Thanks.
Secretary Treasurer, could I just, I missed the opportunity to ask for some numbers to be brought back. Could I do that now?
I'd rather you waited until the assembly was back, and I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
Can you just kind of do that before we start in on something big here, or otherwise it'll just get lost?
Let's ask the chair when she returns.
Yeah.
I'm not quite ready to,
Okay, everyone. That went a little longer. My children are not going to sleep. Some of them are wearing their warmest pajamas on this night.
So Chair, while you were away, just before we start up the meeting again, I was asking the Secretary Treasurer if we could have, with the numbers that are brought back for tomorrow, if we could have the numbers for the Superintendent's Discretionary Fund. So the Secretary Treasurer said, well, wait till everybody's back, including the chair. So you're back. I don't know if everybody else is.
Sure. Superintendent?
Well, I just want those numbers. That's all. So I don't think
she put her hand up, so I'm just recognizing her, Trustee McMillan.
We've got Katrina and Julie trying to find out what it is that you're looking at. And so equity of opportunity is a $1 million and was probably put beside superintendent for the department as just a starting place, but they're trying to match it up for you.
So my understanding is that the superintendent has a fund called the Superintendent's Discretionary Fund. So one would think that would be what it was called in the line items.
I'm fairly certain Superintendent Langstrat axed that. But it sounds like the staff are looking for what you're asking for, and they will certainly bring that information back. But I recall that was a thing, and that it is no longer. It was one of the pockets of money that he found and was like, what is going on with this? Okay, it is 8:52, so we've gone 4 past what we agreed to. So I am going to call us back to order. And so the first recommended motion is that the Board of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, 2021-2022 annual budget bylaw in the amount of $251,031,564 be read a first time the second day of June 2021.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The motion resulting, or the bylaw amount resulting from the informal consideration is a different amount. So we need to say what that is. And that is 254,266,826.
Do you need me to say that out, or is everybody okay with the superintendent has made that adjustment to the record? Big numbers anyways. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Trustee Leonard, Trustee Ferris. Any debate on moving first reading?
No.
Thank you. There's no, it's not debatable? Okay.
To put it on
so we're just going to put it on the floor, and then we're going to turn to our partners, and then we're going to have our debate with amendments. Okay, all those in favor?
Can I just, okay, we're just putting the motion on the floor. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, that's all we're doing.
Okay.
All those opposed? So I've got Trustee Rob Painter opposed, the motion carries. So now I would invite comment from all of our infinitely patient rights holders and stakeholders to weigh in on the option that we developed through the committee process and provide us some advice as we go into debate the budget bylaw formally. So I'm happy to. Trustee Whitaker?
Can I ask respectfully, can the Secretary Treasurer email that to us? Just it's hard to follow on the screens with the Zoom. I would just really value having your Excel that you've got. If you can just shoot it to me, that way I can follow it better. Thank you.
You're muted, Secretary Treasurer Morris.
Do you want me to share again?
I think it would be easier if we just had it, but yes, you could share, but I'd like to hear from our partners and to listen to them.
I just would make the comment, I find it hard with the Zoom people on the side to see the whole screen at once. So if you could send it, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
will,
there's no way for us to see it all.
I will work on that while you are talking.
Wonderful. Ms. Howe, were you indicating that you wanted to go first? Lead us off?
Well, not that I wanted to go first, but I will speak. So if I was the first up, I will. Thanks. Yes, thank you very much for the work that's being done right now. We really appreciate it. I think I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the teachers out there that it's actually exciting to hear you grappling with the issues in this budget and doing this hard work. So in gratitude, thank you. It's been great. I also want to say that I hope that nothing surprising happens in the next little bit and the budget doesn't suddenly pass, because I think there's still some more work to be done. I hope that we can have a little bit more time. I would like I'd like the time to take this back, to discuss it, to ask some questions of our members, and be able to come back tomorrow with more feedback for you. I think that we have given you lots of good feedback, and I feel like a lot of it's been heard in what's been brought forward today. So thank you again for that. But there's more that I'd like to look through, and it's hard in this moment to see when this option's on the table.
Do you want me to clarify process?
No, I think I do know process, but I also know that.
No, I just mean that that we are going to have a meeting tomorrow night. So,
unless someone suddenly decides to move to pass this, to have the third reading right now. So I just am saying that right out loud. Yes, I know there's a meeting tomorrow. Thank you very much.
But we can't do that unless it's unanimous, right?
Yeah. And yeah, thanks. And yeah, one of my outstanding questions is still around reading and recovery, because I know that we've lost FTE in schools right now. We have teachers whose FTE has been reduced. So that's one question that I'm going to be looking for clarity on. And yeah, I've got another question this evening around counseling time and how that will be affected tonight with the shift from Community Link. I think that this is significantly different. So our stakeholders, we do need time to look at it. And so I appreciate having that time. We want to look at it. We're hoping to see this again, look at this tomorrow morning. We're hoping to talk to people. So it's even too soon for me to ask very many good questions. I just want to see a clear idea of what we're looking at so we can bring more information and input to you tomorrow and further on if necessary. Thanks.
Would you like us to look at responding to your questions now, or are you wanting to save that?
Well, if someone has an answer to the specific question that I've kind of formulated right now, since around the reading recovery FTE and the cuts that have
recognizing that there's lots more coming, I'm sure.
Yeah, the cuts have already happened in school. So if anyone does have an answer to that and what that means, because we did hear tonight the 500,000 could be used for reading recovery, and schools could be creative in finding a way to fund that teacher leader, but I'm not clear because I do know people have lost their FTE.
Secretary Treasurer?
Yeah, and so just to make sure that everybody understands the three-part process to reading recovery: the coordinator, the school allocation, and the district matching allocation. That is all rolled up in district staffing right now, and principals will have the ability to change that or amend that based on what the budget delivers. The 500,000 literacy, the balanced K-5 literacy plan will come forward from the district team. And the only amount for reading recovery committed from that money right now is the coordinator of 73,000.
Does that answer your question?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, because I do know how the reading recovery is funded. I know those three parts, but I'm still not certain, for example, why has more FTE been added to inclusive learning teachers in that case? Because I just know that in schools that had reading recovery, the FTE has been removed and those teachers have been reduced. So, but I heard tonight that that 500,000 would still be able to be used to fund the reading recovery. And I guess that's why I'm confused.
The $500,000 that came out of the informal consideration contemplated paying for the coordinator of 73,000 out of there. The staffing, whether it was for the district allocation reading recovery or other teacher staffing to meet ratio, has been deployed. If a principal wants to change that based on the budget outcome today, given that reading recovery coordinator is back in place, if that's what carries forward or tomorrow, then the program as it's trademarked or copyrighted can run, and the principal will have some decisions to make in terms of their staffing.
Okay, thank you. I think I understand what you're saying.
And then in terms of the counselors, based on what's come out of the informal consideration meeting, there is no impact on counselors. Except less of them will be paid out of Community Link, but the same number will be retained just as we have throughout.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So yes, I guess it just means that we're going to talk about this tomorrow more with our group and we'll have more questions. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Ms. Hammer?
Thank you. I just want to go back to the principles that BC PAC articulated in our letter and kind of ground my comments to start there. And the first principle is that it's equitable education that we're providing. And I'm just wondering around how, is there any way before this budget is passed that we could come back to a conversation about, our cuts and our savings equitable, not overly impacting, Indigenous students or kids with learning disabilities or different diverse abilities. So I still don't quite feel like I have had enough time and have just had a chance to really hear somebody analyze that from that, putting that principle up front. And the second one is just keeping cuts as far away from the classroom as possible. And I can understand why, and I'm struggling with adding the communications assistant when I'm looking at cuts to gifted students and clerical staff in schools, because I think about that clerical staff in the school and how important they are for kids, right? It's, kids who are looking for something to eat that day, or, just how much, my daughter has allergies and how much we rely on that clerical staff. And so I'm just, when I balance all of that, I still think you can do more work to reduce cuts from the classroom. And I have a couple of, and I echo Carolyn's comments and the GBTA's comments about time to consult. Parents need more time. And if, it's a big ask, I would love just a week to sit with this. Because how am I here in this moment? It's just parents just, we're all at work. It would just be great to have more time. And I do have a very specific question. I don't understand what that compass, that wraparound service, because it's being not, sorry, I can't see the sheet anymore, but could you talk a little bit more about that? It seems really important for students. And are we losing it? What is being lost? How does it affect kids? That was a lot. But I just want to say the work you guys have done today has been great, and we really appreciate it. And we just would like more of this from you in the future. So thank you.
Chief Thomas, I regret I should have gone to you first, given that we are on your territories. I'm just so used to watching for those flashes of hands, and I think I neglected to do the right thing there. So never too late, I suppose. And Kaylee, I see your hand as well. So just wanted to go through Chief Thomas and acknowledge.
Thank you. We can go to Kaylee.
Ms. Dyer.
Great. Thank you, Chair Waters and Chief Thomas. I'd echo the same sentiments that our previous stakeholders have already stated. I think if I reflect back to the meeting that was held on Friday and to the letter that was submitted by both Chief Thomas and Chief Sam in support of the motion that Rob Painter put on the table to extend the consultation piece, I think that's a really important point to bring up again. And as a result of the letter that was sent to the Ministry of Education and others this afternoon, there has been further conversation between both nations. I know, I'm not sure about the other houses, with the minister as to how to move forward. So I think it's really important that we take some extra time to progress through this consultation process in a good way. So no questions, just a comment to reflect back on the conversations that were had on Friday and the letter that was brought up already today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for centering that. Jane? Ms. Massey?
Yeah, no, here I am. Hopefully I've been kicked out a few times, so hopefully it's nice to me for the next few minutes. But I also wanted to echo what the three people have said before me and appreciate their comments and definitely echo them. And again, appreciate all the work you've done. I think we're probably all going to be dreaming numbers and Excel spreadsheets and things moving around in them tonight, because I know my head is definitely spinning. It's great to see some of the supports, you know, that are potentially getting added back. But again, I hope that, you know, I echo that Trustee Painter's motion that was put forward, and that, you know, you've got the opportunity before you to take all the time you need. Well, not all the time, but more time if that's what you needed. And I also, one thing I wanted to talk about was the, to echo Crystal's, the clerical cuts in the schools. It still does concern me. I think Trustee Whitaker said about maybe it's time with the VP being reduced and the clerical being reduced in the schools that we might be looking at centralizing some things in the district. Well, it wasn't that long ago that some of the centralized programs in the district got offloaded to the schools, some really big jobs, you know, all around the transferring of students. And, you know, just to name one of them, and I know there's others that just won't come into my head right at this moment. And now we're reducing clerical staff at Tolmie as well. And so I don't know who you're going to be moving them back to, but somebody's going to be having fun and, you know, looking for some overtime or something. I'm not sure. But, you know, besides the day-to-day tasks they do look after the students, the staff, and the parents in those schools. So, you know, really hoping you'll give them some more consideration too. So again, thanks. You guys have done a lot of work, and look forward to following this through for the next tonight and tomorrow.
Is there anybody else that wanted to speak in? Okay. So would somebody like to put the second reading on the floor? Thank you, Trustee Leonard, Trustee Painter.
Are we able to amend in the first reading or only in the second reading?
In the second. So we put this on the floor, and then we can haggle to get to a place close to the place where everybody feels comfortable as possible. And assuming that it doesn't carry unanimously, which I think we're hearing loud and clear, everybody wants to get back together tomorrow so that there's time. So I think we're going to do that, even if it did carry unanimously, which I'll fall off my chair if it does. So, so yes, I am looking for a mover that the budget bylaw be read a second time on the second day of June 2021. And I've got Trustee Leonard and Trustee Ryan Painter moving that. And now we open debate on the option before you, correct? Secretary Treasurer Morris? must say, this is my 7th budget as a trustee, and we've never had to do this. This is usually a very, very quick meeting. So I am learning. I think we're all learning how to do this type of a challenging budget discussion. Trustee McNally.
Thank you. We had we had your motion to put the second reading on the floor. We had a mover, we had a seconder. I don't think we had a vote.
No, because we're going to debate it.
Don't we need to put it on the floor before we debate it?
So first reading was moved and seconded and voted on. Second reading is on the floor, moved by Trustee Leonard and seconded by Trustee Ryan Painter. So it is on the floor for debate.
And perhaps do we want to have it up so that we can move amendments to it? Is that the best way to proceed? Secretary Treasurer Morris?
Sure.
Trustee Whitaker?
So I guess, I mean, there are amendments that I'd like to make, but I also would like to have pause at this point and maybe table this until tomorrow. I would like to hear from trustees what questions they still have. I mean, we could keep doing this and amending, but I'm not sure that any amendments that I'm going to suggest right now are going to be informed, right? Like, I think we've got a certain amount on the table, but there's those last few pieces. I mean, I'm willing to sit and go through this. I mean, there's definitely things I would move right now, but I wonder if we can, I guess I'm looking to hear how everyone else is feeling about moving forward on that. I personally would like to hear back from the Secretary Treasurer tomorrow on the Pro-D funds, on eScribe, and there was another one on my list that I thought. Travel, thank you. So just because I mean, maybe not in the big picture, but I do still want to play with those numbers. So I look to see how others feel about
that. Trustee Leonard?
So I understand the questions that have come forward to do with other possible reductions and the quest for more information on those. 2 points. One is that somebody had made a possible recommended motion that committees be struck to work towards next year's budget. And if those types of savings were not found through this year's process, they can certainly be looked at for next year's, as I suspect that we will be back in this situation again. Unfortunately, talking about things that were not on the reduction list this year, and possibly we will have to look at them again, as well as other options as far away from the classroom as we can. So it's whatever happens tonight or tomorrow night is not the end of the process. It's the beginning of a year-long process to talk about how we achieve a balanced budget next year as well, because we are far down the rabbit hole. And so even things that I'll just put it out there, even things like music that aren't on the list right now, those are the types of things I worry about for next year. So we still have to work on through committee level to try and figure out how to not have those types of things appear on a budget reduction list again next year. So we still have a lot of work in the year ahead. So if Trustee Whitaker's suggestions don't make it onto the list in front of us, I would suspect that they're going to be certainly front and foremost on the list that we're moving forward with over the next year, and the committees that we're going to have to set up to move into a balanced budget for next year.
So we do have a motion on the floor, but I want to allow us to figure out the process piece here, but also don't want us to get too sidetracked because we did move the motion. Trustee Duncan, can you help us?
Well, I'm just wondering, I wanted to clarify whether Trustee Whitaker is moving to table, like formally moving to table this until tomorrow, pending the outcome of the additional budgetary information that staff are going to bring back for us. And if so, then you know, I would like to speak to that. Or if not, then I'd like to speak to it anyways, because I think, you know, it is really going to be very helpful for us to have some other options. And I appreciate what Trustee Leonard is saying around this is an ongoing piece of work that we're going to be spending a lot of time on. But my concern is that, you know, the goal is to balance the budget. And yes, we're going to be reviewing it throughout the school year coming. But if we can balance our budget without making the cuts that are proposed now and find money elsewhere where it's further removed from students, then I think it's worth taking the time to do that. And if we can save a little time and energy tonight by tabling things, then I think that's something we should consider. So I guess is Trustee Whitaker moving a motion to table is really what, it was a long way to get to that.
Well, if I'm not, why don't you?
Okay.
So, that can happen before or at third reading. We can do 2 and 3 tomorrow. I just want to make sure that when we leave tonight that we have the option that is as close to what we all want as possible, so that when our partners go away to pour over it, that they're pouring over the best that we could possibly do tonight. So I'm totally open, like as ever. I saw 7 hands go up saying I'm comfortable with this option. So if we're still all feeling that way, but if there's anything that somebody is like, I'm not going to go there, then, you know, maybe I could just do another straw poll, because I'm happy to do 2 or 3 readings tomorrow. I just know if there's, you know, if the majority of us aren't happy with what we've got, then there's no sense sending everybody away to look at it.
Well, I can clarify with you, I can't move any farther forward until somebody shoots me an Excel sheet with the document.
Okay. I fully appreciate that. So may I just, Rob, I see your hand. May I just ask once more if were people feeling relatively comfortable with where we were, or is there massive anxiety? So who's having massive anxiety about where we came to? Trustee Rob Painter. Okay. And Diana McNally. Okay, so we can table it with confidence that we're giving our best effort to our partners to go away and review. I hope you understand that's just my intention, making sure that we're getting as close as we possibly can. Trustee Leonard?
If only 2 people are not able to move forward with what we have in front of us, why cannot the other ones move forward with what we have?
I think because we're either way, we're coming back tomorrow, and like Trustee Whitaker wants to have a look at it. We've heard from our partners, they all want to have a look at it. I think we can move forward confidently, knowing that we got to a really good place tonight. That's my rationale. Others may feel differently, but I'm definitely getting the vibe around the table that there's a majority of people that would like to table.
Yeah. If I may, Chair, just to respond to Trustee Leonard's point, I do recognize that 2 people are 2 votes out of 9, and that might seem insignificant, but that doesn't mean that the reasons that we have for having concerns about this are not easily dismissed. And I do believe that we are stronger when we all work together to share our ideas and perspectives and come to a common understanding. So I don't think it's just down to straight numbers. I think there is merit in us talking this out.
Tonight. So are you speaking in favor of continuing tonight?
Well, if we are to continue in standard debate form as opposed to committee of the whole, then no, I don't see a point. I think that would be a long drawn out process that would take us another hour at least to go through. I just don't see that being a productive way to go forward.
Trustee Ferris?
Thank you, Chair Waters. unusually, I haven't had a lot to say tonight, but I guess my commentary would be that we've made a lot of progress here tonight. For me personally, what I want is a budget. And, you know, cuts to education are generally not very good. You know, there's not a lot to like about the cuts, but I am very interested in what trustees are prepared to do this year, but may have to look at again next year. I think that we have gone a fair distance tonight, and I would be happy enough to put it to bed and revisit this tomorrow. Thank you.
So I think we're now debating a motion to table. I just want to make sure that we have a seconder, which I think was Trustee Duncan, wink, wink, to Trustee Whitaker's motion. Is that sort of what happened there? Is it okay if the record shows that? Trustee Ryan,
but it
you
doesn't
moved
matter.
it. Okay, you moved.
It
We
was
have
a
a
group
mover and a
effort.
seconder. I just want to make sure I have a mover and a seconder.
Yeah,
We're
you got
clearly debating it. Trustee Ryan Painter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very much agreeing with Trustee Ferris. We've done, I mean, honestly, all of us have been working more than just tonight, but I think tonight we've shown the public and everyone watching and everyone here our intention and engagement thoughtfully with this. And I think taking you know, that breath to move second and third reading tomorrow, I think, to me is a wise step. It allows folks to have a glance at what we're doing. It allows staff to come back with some numbers. I'm certainly interested in looking at that e-scribe piece too, Trustee Whitaker, to be very honest. Yeah, so I think all said and done, I'm in agreement. I think tabling till tomorrow is a good move at this point.
Trustee Leonard, I think you may have already spoken, but.
I just wanted to thank the Secretary Treasurer for sending out the spreadsheet. It's on everybody's inbox, so go forth and read.
Speak for yourself. I'm going to sleep on it and look with fresh eyes tomorrow. Crystal, technically we got a motion on the floor, but please go ahead and then I'm going to call the question. So get the last word.
I just was hoping that that spreadsheet could be mailed out to your stakeholders too. I'm getting a lot of texts and asking me to ask for it. So
we will definitely have it posted first thing in the morning for everybody to get going on.
Thank you.
Correct, Secretary Treasurer? I think getting it out publicly, that Secretary Treasurer, can you just confirm that for me? I don't want to lead anyone astray.
Normally we post any supplemental information under the calendar meeting the following day.
Chair, do you mean to postpone the motion rather than table?
Yes, that's definitely what was moved and seconded. Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Abstentions?
The motion to table is undebatable, so I'll abstain.
Okay, well, we had sometimes I'm doing my best here.
I understand.
More process, less processed, trying to find our way and that supports the conversation. I think we landed in a good place.
We'll go south fast.
I think we landed in a good place. Thank you, trustees. That vote carried with 7 trustees in favor. Trustee Leonard was opposed, and actually 6 in favor. Leonard opposed, McNally and Rob Painter abstained. Correct? Okay, seeing no corrections, and that's what the record will show. Would somebody like to move to adjourn? I think actually I have, who's moving to adjourn? Thank you, Trustee Leonard. Trustee Whitaker, before we all rush off, I just want to thank you all so much for your really hard work and the thoughtful and respectful debate that we had this weekend. And this evening, and for all our rights holders and stakeholders and partners and staff around the table. I know how intense this all is, and I think we're all like wildly aware of how much is at stake. And tomorrow evening, we'll be tabling the second and third reading of our annual budget bylaw, and can set the direction for the next school year. So we'll all sleep on it, have a really good look, and come forward with all of our questions, curiosities, and see where we get tomorrow night. But I just really want to express my thanks to everybody. I know that especially the process pieces are onerous, but they are the framework, the scaffold upon which we work. And thank you, everyone. So the motion to adjourn, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Trustee Whitaker, did you want to say something? Nope. It's good night.